blinking blue dot here. What's going on?
All right, we are on.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the July 13th meeting of the Millis Select Board. We have present, in addition to my tie, myself, Jim McCaffrey, who's chair, Mr. Germain, Pete Germain, vice chair, Erin Underhill, the clerk, Karen Beret, our operations manager. Do we have anybody else?
Mike Gazinski.
Mr. Gazinski, is he here?
Yes.
Yes.
I am indeed.
Well, I guess I can only get 4 pictures on this iPhone. If I can just get rid of me, it's better off, I can assure you.
It's just not typing.
I always enjoy the big hand. Okay. All right, so we'll call the meeting to order.
Oh.
The first item on our agenda will be announcements. The announcement relative to the CARES Act grant award, which I'll ask Mr. Gazinski to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just wanted to make sure the board was aware, as well as the community, that we did successfully submit the request for our eligible CARES Act grant funding in the amount of $729,127. And we were issued that full amount. That's been wired to the town. It is in the town's treasury, and we are tracking all the COVID-related expenses of the town. And we'll be working with all the department heads, including the school superintendent and business manager, tracking all the COVID expenses and assigning the different bills related to that grant amount. So just want to thank everyone that worked on that. And also, I know the finance director spent a great deal of time putting that together, so I want to thank her especially. But it was a good team effort. We have the entire amount, and I will keep the board posted as time goes on as to the expenditures and how we're doing in regards to the grant funding.
That's great. I think also, Mr. Gazinski, that the administration announced another program that they were launching, which would provide some additional COVID funding for school districts. I don't know if we followed up with that yet or what the opportunity there is, but it was announced by the governor and the lieutenant governor, and at least in the first issue from the Division of Local Services, it was I believe, $225 per pupil grant. So I'm not sure if you have any further information on that, but certainly, hopefully, if that is a grant that we can pursue, we will do that as well.
Yes, that's correct. We have had some discussions with the schools in regards to the other grant opportunities that are being put out there by the Commonwealth, and we are working with them to pursue those grant funds as well.
That's good. Okay, any other comments from the board members?
Just want to say thank you to everyone that put it together. Very great that we got this.
It is.
It's great.
Okay, I'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the appointment of deputy wiring inspectors for the town of Millis. So I'll ask the town administrator to address the board on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a memo in your packet from the building commissioner in regards to this. We had 2 deputy wiring inspector positions we were seeking to fill. These positions have existed. However, we've done some reorganization within the department in order to save some funds in this year's budget. So we, instead of having a full assistant wiring inspector, we have 2 deputies. The stipends for those are $600 per person, plus $40 per inspection when called upon. So this way of doing this year will save the town over $5,000 in stipends. I have met with both candidates for the positions, with the building commissioner, and I am appointing Jennifer Sweet, who has done some work with us over the past couple of years in a similar position, as well as Michael Mancini, who is the chief wiring inspector for the town of Milford and has been for the past 18 years. We believe that these two individuals will do an outstanding job in handling the wiring inspections for the town over the next year, and I am requesting that the board ratify those appointments for the position of Deputy Wiring Inspector. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has in regards to those two individuals.
Questions from the board?
No?
No?
Just to make it clarify for folks, I mean, the position really is available for wire inspections in individual homes, bigger projects, something that we need to do as a town to support not only homeowners who may be looking to remodel or whatnot, but also the projects that are moving along in our town, which are part of our overall opportunity for economic development. So I think this is an important role. The actual wiring inspector, correct me if I'm wrong now, is Mr. Giampetro, is that right?
Yes, he'll be the acting chief wiring inspector for this year. And again, we did this as a really an organizational matter and for a cost savings for this fiscal year, considering the financial constraints and the concerns. We plan to reevaluate this over, heading into next year's budget season. But we feel that this provides the needed expertise and manpower in the wiring inspector services for the town.
Very good. Other questions? So I would take a motion to approve the town administrator's appointment of these two individuals as deputy wiring inspectors.
I'll move that we take the recommendation of the town administrator and agree to appoint Mike Mancini and Jennifer Sweet as to, what do they call, deputy wiring inspectors, positions at $600 a year plus $40 per inspection.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the board approve the town administrator's appointment of Jennifer Sweet and Mike Mancini. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
The motion is carried unanimously, and those appointments are confirmed. The next item is the appointment of the energy manager, Mr. Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board is aware, Bob Weiss has been the town's energy manager since 2014. The first 3 years that Bob was with us, it was through a regional grant with the town of Medway. That grant did end in 2017, and since that time, Bob has been working with us as a paid contractor or professional consultant, paid out of a consultant expense account. And in your packet, I did include a list of the many accomplishments and cost savings and projects that have been accomplished under Bob's stewardship of the green energy program and for energy management for the town. As the board is also aware, Bob was recently appointed to the position of Economic Development Director and planner for the town, and as such is classified as an employee of the town. So under state regulations, an employee of the town has to be either an employee or a consultant, but is not supposed to carry both those roles. So in order to manage this process, I've appointed Mr. Weiss as the energy manager for the town, and I'm asking for the board's ratification of that appointment. And Bob is scheduled to work 21 hours a week as the energy manager and 19 hours a week as the economic development director and planner. So I strongly recommend this appointment, and be happy to answer any questions that the board may have in regards to the appointment itself. And I believe Bob is on the line as well, if anyone has any questions for Bob in regards to his role and his time with the town.
If I may ask for a clarification, is he becoming an employee of the town now, or is he still consultant and...
No, if the board ratifies the appointment tonight, he would be considered a full-time employee of the town.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, these are roles he's already played, as I understand it. This is a technical adjustment that we have to make because he can't serve as both a consultant and an employee, and he is an employee as the economic development director. So he will be benefit eligible, which is a potentially additional cost, but moving his energy manager status from consultant to employee does not involve any additional cost. Is that correct?
The only additional cost could be he is eligible for supplemental health insurance through the town's health insurance program.
Okay.
Doesn't mean he can take it, but he's eligible for it.
I guess I would like to ask in terms of the reduction in hours that our
Yes,
colleagues...
let me clarify that.
Yeah.
So that is there is a 10% cut in those hours. So it's actually, that would be the regular scheduled year would be 40, but now it's at 36.
Okay. So Mr. Weiss is subject to the town hall reduction in service because of the budget change.
That's correct.
Okay, so what you're looking for is a motion to approve your appointment of Mr. Weiss as energy manager, I guess as an employee, right? Or do you just need energy manager?
Just as the town's energy manager.
So moved.
For a second,
I'll second it.
seconded that the board approve town administrator's appointment of Robert Weiss as energy manager for the town of Millis. Although, no, I have to poll the board. Poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, you earned it.
And you will continue to earn it, right?
Yeah, I intend to. And then some.
All right, the next item we have on our agenda is the appointment of summer help, Mr. Gazinski and Mr. McKay.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the town administrator appoint Patrick Doherty of 10 Cottage Ave, Millis. He will fill the role as a helper, as what we classify as summer help. He'll fill in for the workload that's being taken off of to help, members of the full-time DPW staff to work on the DPW project. It'll be the rate of whatever the I think it's $13.13, Karen, is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Not prevailing wage, but the, it's under
That's
that,
1350.
yeah, it's
How
under,
much
it's
is it?
under
I was
the
gonna say,
personal plan.
what is the total? Minimum wage is what you're trying to
Minimum
say,
wage,
yes. Sorry,
exactly.
it's state minimum wage,
Yep.
whatever the state minimum wage is. Sorry.
And that's the same pay as the, two summer help workers that are already on that are being paid under the personnel plan. But this will be paid out of the DPW project, and it will start tomorrow and end on September 30th. If we have to reappoint, we'll come back.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Yes. If we approve him, will this allow him to do some of the mowing and other things around town that we had discussed at some earlier dates? I just getting
Yeah.
clarification.
Okay, you're absolutely correct, yes.
And I think the only other thing I'll mention is an observation. There are some street signs that, as you drive around, if they could look at unblocking the vegetation. It's been pretty prolific this year.
Yep, they did.
Okay. Well,
Further discussion.
No, none for me.
I would take a motion to.
Oh, actually, sorry,
Um,
Mr. Chair. And just also, you need to, in the motion, approve, how do we say this, Mike? Approve the DPW director to be able to approve the payroll, even though it's coming out of the permanent building account?
Yes, I mean, usually any account that's, or any expenses that are paid out of the project account need to be approved individually by the permanent building committee, but since this individual will have to be paid on a regular payroll schedule, the person, Mr. McKay, would have to have the authority to be able to just pay them on the regular payroll schedule out of the project funds. And I think I think Wayne could speak to it if necessary, but I believe that the permanent building committee could address that at an upcoming meeting to make sure that that could be handled in that way.
may I get clarification on something, please?
Mr. Germain.
Are you saying that we aren't paying this out of standard DPW budget,
Correct.
but we're going to be paying it out of a DPW project, but this individual is not going to be actually working at full time on that project? He may be mowing, he may be doing other things for the town. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
Are we going to run into problems then using these funds in that manner?
So I think the last that we spoke at the Permanent Building Committee, the staff of the DPW, we were not looking to use their hourly rate to come off, and this is, we're going to subsidize it with this type of help.
So I think if I can just expand upon that, I think the assistance that all the staff working at the DPW are providing to the project as a whole far outweighs the any assistance that this individual would provide to the general staff for the cutting and other things here and there over the summer. So on balance, the staff is actually supplementing the project versus vice versa.
I guess my concern is I don't disagree with the concept. Please understand that. I just want to make sure that we're not in a legal violation of what we said to the town. Here's how those funds will be used, and here's somebody who is maybe not being used specifically in that manner. That's what I'm trying to get clarification on.
No, I do not believe there's any issues here with the appropriations and the use of the appropriations in relation to the staff time, and the nature of the work they're undertaking.
Okay.
I believe it's the view of the Permanent Building Committee that the most cost-effective strategy here is to utilize this summer help so that we can take individuals to potentially higher skill level to do the site work at the DPW building itself. So it is a strategy to try and make the money go as far as we can, respecting the taxpayers' interest in making sure that that building is delivered on time and on budget. So I think that's the strategy here.
Yeah. Again, please understand, I don't disagree with the concept, the strategy, or anything. I just want to make sure that there isn't, for somebody who is specifically doing something else, that we aren't opening up a problem for ourselves. That's all.
Okay, well, I think that we're okay, but certainly we can, can continue to ask for clarification. But at this point, I think what the administrator and the director are asking for is the board's approval of this appointment with the proviso that the wage be approved by the DPW director for regular payment. That doesn't mean there's not an accounting made to the the building account, because there is, but this is just a mechanical way of making sure that, the problem was, of course, that permanent building committee meets monthly, and this individual should be paid every other week. So we ran into a difficulty of not being able to meet certain requirements for minimum pay and timing of pay. So that's kind of what the compromise is.
I certainly have no problem making a motion that we hire him contingent upon, just to ensure that we verify that there isn't a problem that way, and that we pay him out of that out of the budget for from the PBC for the building of the new facility or extension of the facility down at Water Street. So I have no problem in that regard, and I'll make the motion accordingly.
Second.
I think the motion needs to explicitly state that we give the DPW director the authority to approve the payroll.
Thank you.
And I will add to the motion that we would also give the DPW director the authority to add to the payroll.
So it has been moved and seconded. I'll call the roll. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Item we have on our agenda is actually an appointment for 8:30, so that's a hearing. And we have to actually hold the hearing at the time we've advertised. So what we'll be doing is moving to the next item on our agenda, which is item 20-137. And this is a request for some rules of convenience for the Permanent Building Committee as it executes the construction of the DPW facility. Mr. Guzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you just stated, there has been a request from the Permanent Building Committee, which is quite similar to the approach that was used by the Elementary School Building Committee for certain approvals and authorizations for the Permanent Building Committee, myself and the chair of the Permanent Building Committee, to be able to approve certain types of change orders without coming back to the board. I know that Mr. Clarko is the chair of the committee. He is on the call. So if he would like to speak to any portion of that, I will defer to him, and I can also answer any questions that the board may have in regards to this.
Mr. Clarko, you have something you'd like to add?
I forwarded a memo to you, Mr. McCaffrey, regarding the reasoning behind the need for this financial approval authority. It's in order to keep the project going in a timely fashion, in order to be able to address changes that normally occur in construction, and to do that in a timely manner. The current financial arrangement in the town would require a meeting, which would require 48 hours of posting. Once we could determine that we had a quorum, we would require a vote. We would then require getting it on the select board's agenda and getting your response, all of which is unacceptable in terms of trying to keep any normal construction project moving. And so what I'm asking for is the same authority that we had, same type of authority that we had at the Clyde Brown project, but expanded to include entering into contracts and purchases in this project because of the need to self-perform the front end and the final stages of this project. And so we will need the ability to timely address those financial requirements without the general contractor, if you will. So we are asking for authority to approve those kinds of transactions as well.
and Mr. Klocko, just again to clarify, this is change orders within the scope and the budget. This is not to add work. It is to adapt the project as it goes forward. Is that correct?
Yes. However, at this point, we don't have a budget. What we have is an authorization from town meeting. We don't have a contract because we've not put the job out on the street yet. We've not hired a general contractor. We frankly don't know where that number will come. And so until we have that piece, which is the biggest piece, we will then look at what is remaining in the town's authorization to determine the amounts that we have for the self-performing portions. And at that point, then we will establish a budget, and the change orders and contract authorizations will absolutely have to fit within that budget.
Other questions from the members of the board?
I have one. Mr. McCaffrey, you are presently our liaison to this project, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So you would be aware of change orders or anything else that able to work with Mr. Klocko throughout the project, correct?
That is correct. So
Okay.
the administrator will also be aware, because what we're trying to do is circumvent some of the more onerous steps, but not to abandon oversight.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify on that point.
Well,
I have no further questions at all.
so, Mr. Germain, to address your point, the request is one where the Permanent Building Committee would have authority up to $50,000, and the chair of the Permanent Building Committee, in conjunction with jointly with the chief procurement officer of the town, would have authority to exercise that authority at and under $10,000.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ms. Underhill?
I do not have any questions.
Okay. I just would like to add, having spent a fair amount of time now on the ESPC project as the liaison, as well as the DPW project that's unfolding, I think the folks, our taxpayers, should understand that to the point that was raised about budgets and contracts, these are very detailed documents. There's a lot of moving parts, and all that we're here to, what the committee is asking for, is the ability to move nimbly in a way to actually execute the project. So it's far, far, far away from here's the building and here's the number. There's a lot of detail. So I think that it's important for the Permanent Building Committee to have this authority. That belies the question as to whether or not the town's bylaw on the Permanent Building Committee is woefully out of date and probably should be amended in the future so as to grant this authority more broadly, but in any event. So there's no further questions. I will take a motion to approve this recommendation.
Okay. I will move to approve the recommendation to allow the Permanent Building Committee to approve change orders, purchases, and contracts related to the DPW project up to $50,000. Additionally, allow the town administrator, chief procurement officer, and the chairman of the Permanent Building Committee to jointly approve change orders, purchases, and contracts not exceeding $10,000.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to authority of the Permanent Building Committee and to the town administrator and the chairman of the Permanent Building Committee. I'll poll the board in favor. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Klocko.
Thank you. We appreciate your confidence in our ability to get this done. Thank you very much.
Now, you can stay since it's only 7:09, or you can go.
Well, I'm going to leave the rest of the fun to the rest of the members on the committee there. So thank you very much.
I want to make one quick comment. I think the town needs to understand how valuable Mr. Klocko's time and efforts have been for this town with respect to the construction projects that are taking place. We would not have been able to consolidate these projects the way we have without his efforts and skill. And I at least personally want to thank you for what you have done for this town, Mr. Klocko.
Mr. Germain, your comments are very gracious and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Wayne.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 20-138, which is the approval of the Metropolitan Area Planning Committee Council's Purchasing Consortium contract. And I'd ask that the discussion be led by Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of paperwork here. Certainly, we're not going to go through all of them. These are contracts that have been already approved.
Hey, Mr. McKay,
Yes.
obviously you have not seen the material for the Emerson Place project. You were
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen it.
well, of course, you have seen it as a member of the planning board.
Yep.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So these three contracts have already been approved by the board. The only one that needs, one's an extension for Pathfinder. That's the first one. It was already vetted through the process through the MAPC, and we would ask that you allow the town administrator to sign a contract. The not to exceed amount, Mr. Chairman, that could be up for discussion. The reason why I put $85,000 there, as we know, the budget was cut from 25 to 15. So what we have in the budget right now is $15,000. The idea that we're going to not spend more than $15,000 is going to be, that's a little out of the scope of what will have to come. After the discussion at town meeting, and you may want to reduce this, that's totally up to the board. It was after the tree warden spoke, this would be a reason, like we did at the last contract for $50,000 that we had to Pathfinder. They took down all the trees. The board approved that $50,000 after the November town meeting vote. You may want to eliminate that 50 and make, we can come back. But there's an option there to leave it in, and I mean, we don't have $85,000 to spend, so we're not going to spend anywhere near up to that, but it's just a not to exceed $85,000.
Well, if I can comment, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, go ahead.
Let me get clarification. 85 is for the trees that we were discussing at town meeting, and we've talked about previously that there could be between 300 and 500 trees, as I recall, and we have this special price. And I know that the town administrator has said that we have some amount of money that he can pull out of the budget, 15,000 or whatever, to do some of that, but the total amount, as I understood it, was going to come to around $60,000 or $65,000 to deal with those trees. And the concern was that if we get into high winds or particularly snowstorms and ice storms, some of the dead trees that are around could pose a major hazard to roads and other locations in the town. But I want to make sure that I understand clearly, is that correct? And secondly, are we looking at a situation that we will clarify later this year, perhaps by the November town meeting, to try to take down the remainder of those trees that the tree warden was recommending? And is that a reasonable thing for us to be doing and deferring at this point? I realize we don't have the money, but that's a whole different issue. I just want to make sure that we understand where we are and where we're going with this.
So I can just briefly explain. So right now in the budget, we have $15,000 in the DPW budget. We've already had the tree company in because we're waiting, because we didn't have anything left over from fiscal year. So we went into this fiscal year, he's already been here. That 15,000, I would say we spent about 4,000 or 5,000 of that already. The idea of the 85,000, you were correct. It was 60. I thought it was 60,000 that the tree warden asked for, and I added the 15 that we already had in place to round it off the $85,000. It was my assumption that the board was in favor of the tree warden and the department and the town administrator to come back in November if the funds were available naturally, and ask for the 60,000 to take down. And you're correct about the number of trees that we would be looking at almost the exact same amount.
Yeah, and I would, Mr. Chairman, if I might, I would reiterate that and say that the 85,000 would allow the town to appropriate up to additional 70,000 for tree services at the fall town meeting, if that's what's decided, and still be able to take advantage of this pricing within the contracts that are before you this evening.
Okay. Excuse me. And just a final clarification, what I was saying about the danger posed by any number of these trees. And I have no idea, I leave it to you and the tree warden, but can we wait until November for the remainder? Or is it something that I got the impression at town meeting, the tree warden was saying, we really can't wait. So I'd like your clarification if possible.
My opinion, I agree with the tree warden in what he spoke. The two trees we took down on Forest Road just this past weekend, luckily they were blocked by other trees. The gentleman from Pathfinder said that we were in luck that because they were completely rotted through, right from the inside, almost spreaded right out. So if trees start coming down and clean up any type of state of emergency, I believe the budget can overextend it until the board clarifies that after a vote after any type of state of emergency that or a town emergency for any hurricanes or something like that. But I do agree with the tree warden's assumption that these trees need to come down sooner than later. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So essentially, again, if I may, Mr. Chairman, essentially the 15,000 that is currently available will have to be used as part of the triaging of all the trees that are that are of greatest concern, and to address those trees first, and then hopefully we will have a sufficient appropriation at the fall town meeting to be able to fully address the concerns that were outlined by the tree warden.
You sure they didn't catch COVID?
They really were trying to go to school, and they can't go to school. So we'll be able to get some of that money. Let me ask a couple of questions, because I want to make sure I understand well. Do we have a line item in the budget of $15,000 for tree removal?
Yes, we do.
So if we were to spend $1 more, we'd have to have an interfund transfer to do that. Is that right?
Well, we have to have a reserve fund transfer, or the board would have to declare an emergency and authorize funding through other means. But we have 15,000 right now free and clear to utilize for taking down dangerous trees. Beyond that, it would require a reserve fund transfer, between now and the fall town meeting.
Yeah, well, let's just clarify. This is a $60,000 ask, right? What is the amount of money in the reserve fund?
I believe it's $50,000.
If that is correct. I try to know what the answers are. So it's unrealistic to suggest, and to leave the impression with the public, that there's a great deal of relief sitting in the reserve fund. I mean, this is something that, if we're going to do the job, we're going to have to appropriate money to do it. And I think we should, from my perspective, I think we should approve the recommendation. And basically, we have a contractor who's willing to do business with us, and when we have the money, we'll be able to pay him for the work. So I think that's really what the recommendation is. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
I mean, none of us like to be in this position, but
Nope.
at this stage of the game, that's kind of where we are. All right, so are you asking then for us to approve the MAPC contract with Tree Services? I'm sorry, with Pathfinder Tree Service? We have two others here. Are they already done, or?
I know we got to go, I would think that this one, the town administrator has to sign the contract for, because this was a one-year extension. The other two are 3-year contracts, but it's a not to exceed amount for general work that we do.
Yeah, but in those cases, we have the money.
Correct.
Okay. So I'll take a separate motion then on the contract renewal for 1 year with Pathfinder Tree Services.
I'll move that we renew the Pathfinder Tree Services contract for 1 year in an amount not to exceed $85,000.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the contract extension with Pathfinder's Tree Services for 1 year, at an amount not to exceed $85,000. I'll call the roll of the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
and the motion is carried unanimously. Now, do we then move on to the catch basins and pavement markings?
Yes, sir. So the next one, I probably should have put it in a different order. If you don't mind, I'll go to the markings because that's out of the general budget.
Yep.
There is $20,000 in there for line painting, and that's for the center lines and whatever. That's an annual cost that we always spend every year.
And again, this is a contract under the MAPC consortium, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the purpose of that really is to try to collaborate with other cities and towns to get the best price.
Right.
And we're active participants in that.
Yes. Very helpful.
Discussion. Anybody have a discussion on this one? Take a motion.
I move that we approve the contract through December 31st, 2020 with Markings Incorporated, not to exceed $20,000 for pavement markings.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Underhill.
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Now, these will authorize the town administrator to sign on our behalf. And the last one is catch basins.
Catch basins, that will become out of the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, and that's for our yearly cleaning of all catch basins throughout the town of Millis. And this is already a 3-year contract. Again, this is over the $10,000 amount, so that's why we're here asking for your approval that the town administrator can sign
Right.
contract.
Okay, so this is part of a 3-year deal, but we have to get you have to give him authorization. And this is a direct charge to the Stormwater Fund.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Not too glamorous, but necessary, and it's part of our requirement on our permit, right?
That's correct.
So, questions from the board? There'll be none. I will share the load and make the motion myself. I'd make a motion that the board approve the contract with Truax Corporation to expire on December 31st, 2020, an amount not to exceed $50,000 for catch basin cleaning to be paid by the Stormwater Enterprise.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Further discussion. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Okay. Mr. McKay, the next item we have on our agenda is the Phase 2 asset management contract.
Thank you. So this was approved earlier in FY20, but we had to wait till the funding for sources that we had enough money to pay out of FY21. The memo states that the total match by the town is $85,998 of a grant of $214,000 and somewhat change. I don't know, the exact changes. It's broken down in 2 different levels. The in-kind service, that means at hourly rates that stormwater members and the staff in my office will need to do to get the work order system and the assets, loaded into the system. That cost us $31,780. That's just a flat. There's no money being taken out of any of the budgets for that. That's just our hourly rate for myself, the 2 staff members in the DPW office, and field services for that. The cash in kind match is $54,218. In a conversation that we had with myself, the town administrator, the finance director, and Kleinfelder, we decided to have, we felt this was the best breakdown. We did look at what services and what enterprise fund and the general fund, what kind of services that we're going to get from this. And that's how we came up with these percentages on the bottom of the page. The good thing what happened with the asset management one, at the beginning it was all paid out of water, sewer, and stormwater. We felt that there was nothing from the general fund. So that part of the work order system was going to have to be built for the general fund for whatever complaints would come in. There was enough time that was left over, and we felt it was within the budget. So we loaded all the general aspect of the whatever type of the work order system is added in for the general fund. And so that's why we felt the 7% of the general budget should be, added into this project. Most of these costs will come out of all the engineering funds. Each one of them have the funds in the engineering line items in the water, sewer. I'll read the amount so people are watching it. The water is at 35% of the $54,218 at $18,847.99. The sewer is a 25% match at $13,421.25. Stormwater is 33%, and that's $18,110.33. And the general fund is at 7% at $3,838.29 for a total of $54,218.
Okay, I had a question. And this relates, of course, to what the asset management program is supposed to do.
Sure.
And, essentially what we're doing is we are creating is too strong a word. We are organizing and making more effectively available the list of assets that the town has, as well as to look at longer term how we have to preserve that or what we have to add to. So that being said, this doesn't necessarily, it really reflects the value of the assets that the enterprises consist of. I mean, for example, the sewer system, may have a very significant installed asset, whereas the town may not, which is why these costs should be higher based upon the enterprises installed, frankly, and to be installed and to be repaired material. So that being said, I guess one question that I would like to understand, in terms of the asset management, and maybe it's not for tonight, but when we decided as a board and the town meeting approved essentially the outsourcing of the water tank maintenance and repair, are we taking that off the asset management program, or are we leaving it on and just assigning responsibility to a third party?
That's absolutely correct. We're not taking it off. It's just assigning the cost of the repairs of it. So the assets will still remain there. The several $1 million of assets in both the tanks will remain. It's just the repair of it.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the town's assets, what is included in the plan? What are we keeping track?
So hopefully over the winter, before we get to, maybe next May town meeting, as you know, we already did a road survey.
Right.
We would look into, representing that to the select board and seeing where you want to go with that. With all the roads coming up next, we updated it every year that we've done it since I think we actually did that, town meeting approved that maybe 2 years ago. That is complete, and, so the assets of the general fund are the sidewalks, the street signs, the crosswalks,
Okay.
all that stuff, and the lights itself. Are all
Now,
that
what the buildings?
The buildings for the DPWs is the share of the new building, and that cost, the salt shed, the gas tanks, and all that will be split, because they're split
But
accordingly.
in terms of asset management program, I guess what I'm asking is, to the extent that we have buildings as part of our assets, like the town hall, like the schools, like the police station and the fire station, how do they get reflected in this plan at all, if at all?
They don't yet, but there is a growth for that to be added into it.
Okay. So ultimately, that's part of the program.
Yes.
And this is designed to get at what I would call the installed infrastructure of water, sewer, and highway, and stormwater.
All the underground facilities. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, other questions from board members?
Yes.
Mr. Germain?
What are we really getting for $54,000? Are we getting a program? Are we getting software? Are we getting management? Who are we paying the $54,000 to?
It will be through Kleinfelder. That's what the contract would be, is through Kleinfelder. It'll be continuation of the asset first phase that was gone through. This we'll get down into the pipes in the ground. They'll actually figure out, label how many miles of pipe. Right now, the last phase, all we did is, here's the water main on Main Street. This phase will take, let's say, the water main on Main. What is the cost of that water main from Midway to Medfield? When is it going to cost? When are we going to have to redo it? When is it going to have to be replaced? So you times that by water, sewer, the lift stations, the sewer stations, all the water treatment facilities. There's no plan of what needs to be replaced. What's the cost of them? What is actually the cost of one building, the treatment facility at the DPW building, and what are the costs of the two wells? What would it cost if we have to replace them? What's the cost? What is the schedule of, instead of just saying, okay, it's been 5-10 years, let's have them cleaned. There's a great cost in shutting those wells down and having them cleaned. So this plan will give us that. First, it will give us the cost of, how much is it valued at, and then here's the next 5 years. This is what's going to be fixed.
Where is all of this hosted?
It will be hosted on the computer system that is being built. That's already built for the asset management, for phase one.
We have rights to it in perpetuity. We're paying for it.
We will, absolutely. It's ours. Well, we have to pay like the $5,000 service fee for CityWorks that will maintain it for us.
Who will?
The enterprise funds.
No, I understand, but who you just mentioned CityWorks, not Kleinfelder. So CityWorks owns the software?
CityWorks is the builder of the software, correct?
They are. And where do they host the databases?
It's in a cloud. It's just with what we have. For us to operate it, there will be an app that we will have to, we'll download on the tablets that we have in the computer system at the DPW.
And I assume you looked at other apps from other companies before we went with this specific organization?
Yeah, actually, this board voted on. We presented this to this board. We interviewed, I think it was 3 different firms before we came up with CityWorks.
Just asking the questions.
Yep. No problem.
And do we have the rights, if we ever chose to pull the database in-house or move the database to another location of our choice?
I believe we can. That's a technical question that, believing CityWorks is going to be giving you a call before we install any or download anything on any of the computer system here.
Okay, so let me clarify for my own self. We're paying a certain amount to CityWorks for using the databases and the application programs that feed those databases with access to them. And we're also paying a certain amount to Kleinfelder, from what you're saying, to input the data and survey and input the data that's going into that system.
This would be the one-time fee as part of this grant, correct?
And what portion of, say, the 54,000 goes to Kleinfelder versus the database company?
The whole 54,218 is it's a contract straight through Kleinfelder.
So do we know how that's being broken up between them and the database company?
So there's a certain amount that, again, I think that was presented to the board. I don't have it. It was already presented to the board back in, I think, November, probably at our last meeting that we were all live. That was presented to the board. Betsy and Andrew presented that. Right now, the cost of the system's built, so it would just be an inputting cost for them to download it. So I don't think it's a large cost for CityWorks to download this information.
Okay. I'm looking to ensure that we don't end up being captive to any one company, if at all possible, so that we have options open to us in the future. I'm not disputing that we need to do it. Please understand that, and that you haven't examined it carefully, but I'm trying to put on a different hat when I am asking these questions.
That's fine. And my belief is no, we're not, just like the asset management for the tank with some sort of a notice, I'm sure we can pull out of these contracts.
Okay. Ms. Underhill, do you have questions?
I think so. So kind of piggybacking off of Pete, the 54,218 would be going to Kleinfelder for this next phase of the asset management, where they would be surveying those assets and helping to evaluate what may need to be done when, kind of, capital planning-ish for these things. And out of that 54,000, they're coordinating with the CityWorks vendor, who has a program that Kleinfelder is going to input data into that people can access through an app.
So let's just go back. I mean, this contract is actually for $214,000. The grant is actually $214,000. So to get all this work done, it's costing $214,000. The 54 is the cash, only our cash end of it. The in-kind services of $31,000. That's also. So I think what we're talking almost $86,000 for the town as part of the matching part of the grant. So yes, all of that is built into what was presented to move forward with this project back in November. Yes, it was even. I think it was November.
Okay, so I apologize, but no. So there's already part of this approved out of this 214,000, and we're just dealing with the almost 86,000 right now.
So it was approved that we would move forward with phase 2 of the grant. When it was accepted, when the town was approved for the grant, there was only so many cities and towns in the state were approved for that type of money, and Millis was one of them. All this was all approved, and then we had to hold off on the funding for the town administrator to sign the contract until now, because I couldn't come to the board and say, this is where I'm taking $54,000 out of the DPW budgets across the board until today. Because we're in FY21.
Okay.
In services we could do, I mean, that's hourly rates, but it's the cash that we actually have to put up. And that's usually the first payments comes out of our, comes on us.
Would you normally use your own people to input the data rather than Kleinfelder?
So it's not actually, so what we have to go, we have to be trained on how to continue this to be going on further. As you can see, it's training, inspections, and meetings. So we would go with one of the Kleinfelder persons when they come out and look at the culverts. We would have to show them. We would just be assisting them. So they wouldn't send out 3 people. We would send out maybe 2 to go with one person. Instead of them, so that cost would have been, that 54 would have been a lot more if we had to pay them to have 2 or 3 staff members for them to come out.
But when this is done, you won't need Kleinfelder any longer. You use your own staff.
That's correct. They're training us how to, the software that was on the first grant, it already has the ability that we can take you can take your cell phones, iPads, and we can go out and we can locate, GPS it right onto our system that we had already had from a grant that I received maybe 4 or 5 years ago for the GIS system.
I have one more question, if I may, Mr. McCaffrey.
Yes.
Just in a technical sense. So if we were to make a motion for this, is it 2 parts? Are we approving the in-kind match as well as the cash part, or are we only dealing with one part of this?
I would have to leave that up to the town administrator.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you're basically approving going ahead with the grant and with everything, all aspects of it. So you'd be approving the cash expenditures from the different accounts, as well as approving the work to be done from the departments towards this project.
Other questions?
We have the cash even in the general fund to do this.
Yes, sir. So we, like I stated, they're all coming out of engineering funds, and there is substantial, there is enough funding for engineering services out of that. Yes.
I guess I would like to just say a couple of things. The first thing is that clearly, from a strategic point of view, at least my view, is that the creation of an asset management system is a critical component of a couple of things. Number one is just the organization of the DPW and how it accounts for its work. It was clearly an important component of the organizational review that was done by Paradigm Associates. They talked to us a lot about the need for an asset management system, which is not just paper and pencil, but actually a technologically advanced system that is available to manage the assets and to support planning. And the second component clearly is the work that the Capital Planning Committee has been doing with the help of the department, with the help of the town administrator and the finance director. But from our point of view, at least my point of view, I'm not speaking for the Capital Planning Committee, it's still a little too much guesswork. And this is going to give us more precision, because what we're trying to do is have a capital plan that is based upon scientifically determined asset management process. So I think those things are important for people to keep in mind as to why we're doing this. Is this the right way to do it is really what we're talking about. I think that it is. I think that we are taking advantage of grant money, and we have to do our part to make sure that the system is adopted and is robust enough to be used in the future. And it does, I suppose, eventually bring us back to a question that we've raised periodically over the years in terms of engineering costs. At what point in time does it make sense for the town to have its own engineer? Not that I can answer that question tonight, but it is important for me to understand that ultimately, once you have the asset management plan in place, does that allow you to leverage engineering talent more effectively? So not for tonight, but I do think we need to keep that in mind, because I think, as you're hearing, the board sees a lot of engineering bills. And I don't mean the ones that are paid for by developers, but these are the kinds of things that are paid for by either the enterprise or the taxpayer. So I'm sure this is not the right year to be talking about adding staff. But that's certainly part of this conversation ultimately as to how this gets utilized most effectively. So, any other comments from the board or anyone?
Can I just add one thing, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be quick. I think you already stated this, but for everyone to remember, this can be built on, and this can be, the schools can build off of this work order system, this asset management, police, fire. So we'll be able to add all of this, depending on where funds come available. So this can be built on.
Well, again, I think that's important. And from the board's point of view, at least with respect to the municipal side, it ultimately, from my perspective, is not that it should be, but that it will be. That's the goal. If this is the system, and this is the way we're going to build it, then we're going to leverage it across all of the town departments. And I would urge, of course, ultimately the school department to participate. But that's getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Terry's very interested in it.
All right, any other comments from the board? Anyone? So we have then a proposal in front of us that the town improve the in-kind match and the cash match for the asset management project. And I guess we could make a reference out to the document dated July 8th, 2020, which is shown on the screen here, which indicates the percentages and the amounts of in each of the categories. I'm not sure that I've said enough to actually make it a motion, but I'm going to pretend that I did.
Second.
It's all good.
So it's been moved and seconded that we approve the proposal for the FY21 grant funding for the asset management system. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Okay.
May I ask one quick question, Jim?
Yes.
That is, it's important that the training you talked about, we try to parcel it out as much as possible throughout the town.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, Mr. Kaczynski, I would also do what we could to encourage anyone from the schools to attend some of this training, just even if they're not certain they're going to do anything right away, just to become a party to the process.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we can certainly communicate with the school folks, and we can talk with them and strongly encourage them to take part of that training. And I think our initial discussions with them have been very positive.
Great. No, I concur with our chair that this is very important to how we move forward in the future.
Okay, the next item on our agenda
Back to the
is...
other two, or you want me to come back to the other ones? I can wait if your hearings.
No, it's not till 8:30.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, good. Keep going.
Jim.
Phase 2 Cybercom DPW radio system proposal. Okay.
So this is the second phase of the radio system. The amount is for $36,666. In this packet, I included the contract, which Lisa's already reviewed. And that's Lisa Moran, the town accountant. She's already looked at it, and it says it's fine. I gave an email. Town council's also reviewed it and stated, Lisa Mead stated that it was, as long as it's a state grant, that we do not have to get 3 bids. And that's actually for both this one and the previous one. I had this before, but I felt this was the more expensive one, so I held off all that paperwork till this one.
I have one question.
Yeah, hold on. So what we're talking about here then is the request for approval of the rest of the budget for the system. Is that right?
That's correct. So this is the antenna, the repeater. I think that's the biggest cost is $8,000 for the repeater, and the installation cost for all of this is another $12,475. That's to install the 20 plus units and install the repeater and the radio antenna on the tank.
Okay. And Karen, can I ask you if you could try to scroll forward to this?
Certainly.
I'm just concerned in the letters, all I was going to say is on the first line, you have 36,666, but down at the bottom of that line, you have a 667. So I'm just wondering
Where are you seeing
if we
that?
want to make a correction or if there's something I'm missing.
Nope, you want to make that correction. It is 366,666.
Right, I saw that
666, you're correct. Yes.
down below.
It's a little,
Well, it says we approved 667, right?
There'll be $1 left over.
Be $1 left over. We will return to the general fund and be swept into free cash.
That's correct.
thank goodness.
Every dollar counts.
Do we
Right.
parcel that out?
Yeah, we can parcel that out along amongst the,
So I can just quickly go across. So the big unit, that's the repeater that gets installed. That'll be installed with the police,
Right.
fire. There'll be 3 separate units on that. That's the repeater. The first radio, that's that's going to go in the DPW vehicles. The third one will go into supervisor vehicles. There's 3 of them, and that's going to be the one that will be able, in the future, we'll be able to communicate. Myself, the police chief, the fire chief, and who they deem necessary. So that third unit is a multi-use. It can go across different channels. Those are very expensive. That's why we didn't get them for every vehicle. There was no need to put them in dump trucks. But we can also, with this unit, the one that you see that has the white, we can actually talk personally to each. We can queue up that whoever, let's say we're calling the dump truck, we can talk to that person separately without everybody in the system listening, hearing the conversation.
Okay, any other questions from the board? I mean, we have discussed this quite a bit. And this is just the rest of the money, right?
Yes, sir.
So I would take a motion.
I move that we approve $36,666 for the radio communication system for the DPW vehicles.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract in the amount of $36,666 for the radio communication system for DPW. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Next item is street paving.
One subject every year. So there's 2 different things that I would ask the board to approve tonight. The contract with PJ Albert, they were the lowest bidder. We had 7 bidders, and he was the lowest by far. I did the reference checks. He's actually, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Orchard Street any minute now, when we're done with this. And he's actually the same contractor working for Toll Brothers that's going to reclaim and pave Orchard Street. So I would ask that we approve the amount of $462,712. Again, there's 2 reasons why I did this, and I will explain. How do I explain? So the total amount of the paving that we're going to do, which I will give you the 4 items in a minute, is $381,232. When we first put this bid out, we always go in, we ask for a higher amount because we hope it comes in lower. The good news is, let's remember, the town administrator put in for a grant through the state of $100,000 to pave Route 109. We have not heard back on that yet. And if we did not approve this extra $100,000 to pave that, this would have to go out to bid again. So the bid was actually put out, whether the scope of work was in there or not, but it's still the amount of money would give us enough money to pave. And we're looking to pave from Medway Town Line to Hammond Lane. Now, if that appropriation doesn't come in, again, we're just not going to pave it because we don't have the funds to pave it. So that's why when you look at not to exceed, and with the total of the 4 projects that we're going to do, there's such a big gap in there. So do we have any questions on that first, and then get to the budgets? the projects.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So you had mentioned that there was the $100,000 grant that Mr. Kaczynski was going for this. So is it just a $100,000 grant, or is that how much that 109 paving would be? Because if that's true, then this is not enough money.
So it's actually not even a grant. It's an appropriation. It's a state appropriation, and actually heard a little bit of good news about that, and he can report on that in a minute. So if you look at the balance down the bottom, we have a balance of $88,110. So if we needed some of that money, we could put it under Chapter 90 funding, because it would be appropriate.
Okay.
So Mike, I don't know if you want to...
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, the 100,000 is actually just a legislative earmark request. We every year the legislators ask for some funding needs of the town. Actually, this regards to a transportation bond bill that is being put forward currently in the state legislature, and in speaking with the DPW director, we believe that the some repaving on Route 109 is desperately needed and has probably the highest chance of getting a successful earmark approved. And the 100,000 figure is oftentimes the cap upon which the legislators will push that forward, just because there are a lot of different towns going for a lot of different things at the state level. So the 100,000 isn't a mark as what's needed. It's really a mark of what is reasonable to anticipate we might be able to obtain from the state.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of the material, the paving recommendations we have, they don't include the 109 at this point. Is that right?
That's correct. Well, I would come back and ask for that appropriation if we get the funding.
So at that end of 109, is there, give me some, other than I know the road's lousy, I mean, is it traffic? What is it? Because as you well know, the business travel down that end of 109 is much higher today than it was a year ago.
It's just the idea of what we would have to do to even bring it back to, it would take weeks, months for us to mill and pave that. If we don't get this appropriation or this earmark, then it's something we're going to have to, the DPW is going to have to address within the budget. Because to pave it, I mean, the two sections that we've done, and actually, you know what, I would like to also add that, we would hopefully take care of that appropriation, pave the two spots in between Plain Street from the fire station to Park Road, and from the other end of Park Road, if you remember, to Exchange Street to finish them off. So I think that's, yeah.
Where I'm driving, as you might think I would, is to impact payments. What business is having a bigger impact on that road than any other? This is a rhetorical question, but something that's worth conversation, certainly.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, I think that that's the worst of Route 109. I think that we addressed the two more serious areas in the past 2 years, in front of the library to the police station. And then we did it from Plain Street to in front of the town hall.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the other ends, they're minor stuff that can be addressed by the equipment that the DPW has.
Well, it's not so much how we do it, it's who's going to pay for it. And I guess that at this stage of the game, what you're asking us to do is to authorize, approve anyway, an expenditure subject to some funding that we're trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's correct.
So again, if we don't get a state grant or find some other opportunity, then we won't be able to do that 109 component.
That's correct. And that's why it's not actually even on the, but we did advertise the bid for the 462, and I felt that was a good opportunity, because there was areas that even if we don't let's say we have this 88,110.84 left over. And then all these other projects, if they come in lower and we end up with almost $200,000, let's say, we keep our fingers crossed. That ain't gonna happen, but, you know, it might, it could. We still have that amount that we could look at, say, let's start doing Ridge Street instead of next year. Maybe we can do a little bit more, you know, start paving Ridge Street this year. It would just be, it's still under the bid price, and we could still come back to the select board and appropriate that.
Are you suggesting that, from your perspective, Ridge is next on the list?
That would be one of my next year and 5-6 years by the time we get it done, yeah. Yes.
Right? It's not as bad as Orchard Street, Jim, but it's pretty bad.
We're going to talk about that. I have good news. That's coming.
All I know is my car's front end is going to be readjusted very quickly.
Could I ask, before we get any further questions from the board, if you could go to, I think it's the third page. Oh, here it is. It's right up here now. Just to go through quickly
Sure.
what projects you're proposing, the actual roads and whatnot.
So most of the are extensions of what started a process over the last couple of years. And believe me, they're coming right off the list of what are poor. You know, most of our roads have gone from fair, good to poor, and these are all of the poor. And I'm sure you can drive any one of them, and you can agree with that. Island Road, we actually shimmed that up in the last couple of years, and it's just throwing money, good money, you know, into bad. The road needs to be ripped up. It's 775 feet. So that would be from Exchange Street to, I believe, the first entrance. I gave you two different maps of Island Road. So it would be the first entrance. And I forget the side street. That's off that. But it's the first entrance of the map that you see. And that's at $100,205.
It's in Timberline, right?
Timberline, correct, yes.
Okay.
And then what we would do next year, from the first entrance of Timberline to the second entrance of Timberline, that can be milled because there's enough base under that it can be milled, and we can just pave that and finish that section. It would probably hopefully go right to the where it goes into up to the landfill. We wouldn't go all the way to the landfill because no one drives up there, but at least to the second Timberline entrance next year.
Okay.
The second is 3 years it took us to get Union Street completed finally, and this is 1,055 feet of roadway that would be milled and top coated, and that's $103,205. Third item is the beginning. We would start right where Mr. Fox's project that he's not here. He was eating lunch a little while ago on there. His project ended right at the culvert. We would continue from that, and we would mill and pave 1,055 feet. So I miscomputed. Union Street's 1,150 feet. Farm Street, 1,055 feet.
Okay.
Milling and paving that. And it would take us, you know, maybe another 2 to 3 years to maybe get that Farm Street finally, you know, done from Village Street to Main Street. Because if we did it, let's say if we took this one road, let's say use Farm Street, if we did from the culvert where the project ended, where the Hickory Hills project ended, where they tied into the sewer, and we went all the way to Village Street, we wouldn't do anything else. And I don't even think we'd have enough to go that far. And then the fourth project is Oakview Ave. I think if many of you have driven, it's just another road that is it's off of Exchange Street. It goes in between Exchange and Union Street. It is a big cut through. A lot of people use that to get into the subdivision. A lot of people use that to go to Oak Grove Farm. And it's just, it can't be fixed. It can't be patched any longer. And that cost is, that's going to be a milling and paving of $73,297. That's 825 feet. So the total of the paving this year is $381,232. And that will take care of 3,805 feet of roadway. If you go to the top available funds, is 470. This is our this is all Chapter 90 funding, and I think I gave you that the spreadsheet in the packet, tally sheet
You
from
did.
the state, and that leaves us with a balance from what we had left over last year in this year's appropriation of $470,840.45. We have an outstanding job there that I will look into of $1,497.61. It was part of the Exchange Street sidewalk. It's not closed out. I don't know why, but I can close that out, and those funds will be available by the end of the season. I just have to send the paperwork in. So we do have enough money to pay for these projects. We have a total on hand with Chapter 90 funding of $469,342.84. If I did my math correctly, if you subtract the 381 from the 469, we will still have a reserve of $88,110.84. If you look at this sheet here that Karen has right here now,
Sorry.
we were allowed this year to combine everything in one project, which is very helpful for me to when I have to close these out and send the paperwork in to get refund all the money to be refunded for us. The biggest cost that I saw, if you look at the road project, the price per ton, last year we were paying $76 for asphalt per ton. This year it went up to $110. And that was even on the low, that's the low guy who bid in there. So we're looking at an increase of $34 a ton for asphalt. Police details went up. I don't think that number's going to be, I think it's a little on the high side. I'd rather do that. I don't think we're going to need all that much for police details, but I think we appropriated $3,000 for each project.
Okay. So this is your recommendation for the projects to do, with the proviso that we may have the opportunity to do some work on 109 if we get some funding.
Right.
And how much of the general fund, the taxpayers' general fund, is included in this number?
Not 1%. Well, I mean, you pay for it through taxes and stuff like that, but there's nothing coming out of the general fund budget.
Oh, zero is the answer. The town is not appropriating, right?
Yes, correct.
And I'm not proud of it. None of us are proud of it. It's just the fact is that we're trying to do a job with funding from the state where the state funding is inadequate, and we have not been able to find a way to increase our appropriation through utilization of tax money. And, you know, it's just a fact of life. I mean, that's the way it goes. It's just the trees story all over again. I mean, it's just that we had the money, we do the work, but we don't. Okay.
Can I just, I'm sorry. I know I say I'm done, but I'm not. That $88,110.84. Someone should say, well, why are we leaving so much buffer in there? Because if one of these projects don't come in, if they come in higher, and if we go over that $469,342.84, when Lisa tried to balance the books at the end of the year, either it's got to come out of the DPW general fund, or there'll have to be an appropriation at the November town meeting. And I don't want that. I would never want to come back to the board and say, hey, look I told you we were going to spend $381,000, and I just spent $469,000 on 4 different projects. So that's why eventually some year when we start appropriating some money into that, we might be able to build off of that we can leave some sort of a cushion in there.
Questions from the board? Okay. Doesn't seem to be any. At this point, I go back to any further questions. I'm sure we all share the concern that we're doing the best we can. But what you're really asking for at this point in time is that we approve and sign the Chapter 90 paving contract with the company for an amount not to exceed $462,712. That gives you the maximum flexibility to execute the projects that you have indicated, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I'll make the motion and then we can have discussion. I would make a motion that the board approve the request of the Director of the Public Works to sign a contract, Chapter 90 paving contract with P.J. Albert, Inc. of Fitchburg, Mass. in an amount not to exceed $462,712.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Further discussion? All those in favor? Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a quick question?
Yes, please.
Maybe you know, Jim, or somebody knows. I know there's been a concern with respect to the Dover Road, the bridge.
Good thought. No, good news.
Perhaps you can give us an update on that, please?
Yes, so just the other day I was sitting at the desk here and I got a call from a contractor, and he said that he was a contractor that's going to be working on replacing the Dover Road Bridge. And he needs to hook up a hydrant, and the one in the Millicent is a lot closer to, the job site than the one in Medfield. And of course I got really excited. I went running down to Mike, and it's like, neither one of us have heard anything about this. I've tried to research it with the DPW director, but I think he's on vacation in Medfield. And the state engineer, they're still not back to work yet. So again, I think that is fairly good news when he says, they haven't told us, if they're looking for an appropriation from Millis, they would have to come here and for us to...
They haven't approached us to ask for any funding towards the project. The last time I spoke to anyone in regards to this was the town manager over in Medfield, and she had indicated that the state had given her indication that they were going to be putting it out to bid. And she has been waiting, so have I, to see if the state was going to approach us to ask for any type of local assistance for the construction, and we have not gotten any correspondence from them. So I would take that as good news at this point, that they're moving ahead with the minimum repairs to the bridge. We haven't gotten anything, any details on the scope of the repairs, but it certainly looks like it would take care of the bridge for a period of time. So it looks like we may have dodged a bullet on that one. We will be trying to get some additional information from the state, and I will put in another call with the town administrator at Medfield to see if she's received any additional information from them.
I sure wouldn't look that gift horse.
No.
No.
And let's remember, we still have $100,000 that one of these state appropriations that was given to us in FY20 that we carried over for the repair of that bridge. So we do have $100,000.
It is sitting in our accounts in case, the state does look for something from us. We have a little bit of money, but we're going to wait and see what the state, tells us, or if they, I would imagine if they were going to seriously approach us for funds, they would do it before they start the project.
One would think.
Yeah.
Well, that's great news. Thank you very much.
Jim? Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Now tell us a little bit about Orchard Street, please.
So can you just take a vote? I usually take a vote that the board approves myself, the town administrators, and the DPW superintendent's recommendations for the 4 roads.
Sure.
Oh, right.
So we gave you the money, now you want to know the roads. So I make a motion that we approve the town administrator and the DPW director's recommendation for road work on Island Road from Exchange to Timberline, Union Street from Pollard to Rosenfeld, Farm Street from Alma Road to Farm Street, 130 Farm Street, and Oakview Ave from Exchange Street to Union Street.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Okay, motion is carried. So you have the money and the streets. Go to it. And now Orchard Street.
Yes, so we're on Orchard Street. If the COVID didn't set us back, it actually set back the work for both Toll Brothers, RBO, and the gas company. That's were the 2 holdups for the past 4 months. the RBO had to come out and they had to make a sewer repair on the low flow side of the force main, and that was for the hookups for all the houses. And they couldn't mobilize because of COVID-19 and all that. They came out about 5 weeks ago, and they made the repair. And the good news we have 9 applicants of Millis residents that are taking up on the tying into that sewer system. So they made the repair, and that made that available for the residents to finally start hooking into sewer. We've had 3 different residents that were on wells that are tying into the stub of the water main further up, going towards the project itself, have tied into the water system. So that's all good news. Most of that work's off the roadway that needs to be done. The biggest problem was that the gas company, there was one project that the DPW had to do, that we had a drain line that was broken. And that was a good cause of why I think you remember I sent you the pictures of the flooding when we had that heavy downpour on that Saturday night, and many residents' property was damaged. One of the catch basins up near towards Walnut Street was broken. In the next street down, that's where we had to make the repair. But when we started excavating it, we went into the manhole, we took a picture, and the gas company put their gas main right through the drain line. It went straight right through it. So naturally, we couldn't make the repair to the drain line until the gas company came and lowered it, and which they did the week after. It took them almost 2 weeks to come out and move the gas main and lower it. All this time, the planning of reclamation and paving, putting the base course down, is being pushed off. So they came out and they finally made the repair, which was one of their crews made that repair. The next problem was, at the end of the winter when we shut them down, they had 10 homes that wanted to buy into the gas service. So with their COVID-19, they actually didn't start working, going into people's homes, I'd say about 14 days ago. At the most 3 weeks ago, and I don't think it's been that long. And the gas company, it's a live gas main, they will not connect anything and just put a stub off to the side of the road for further future hookups. So that pushed the whole project back, and they're up there right now, and I have promised, mainly it's Toll Brothers, and it's the same contractor, PJ Albert. He's going to come in and do the work. So he's going to mobilize on the 20th, which is next Monday, and he will start reclaiming, and he will go to, from the bridge all the way up to where they left off. They're going to put, with the gas company and all that type of construction, we have to let it sit another year. So the whole road will be from the town line. It'll be that same type of pavement from the town line to, I think it's past, how far down does the pavement go, Jim?
Basically, it goes just to the little hill up on Orchard Street, between the entrances to Bargastell.
Right. So they'll pick up there, and they'll put the base course down and let it sit until April of next year. I told them that they had to line it this, we couldn't leave no center line, not in the road again. So they are going to do that. So that's going to start on the 20th. It won't take that long to get that reclaimed, and that'll just let that whole area settle, because I don't want to put the binder down, put the top coat down, and then 5 or 6 years we're going to own that, a wavy, settling type of, because there's 3 different trenches in there. There's a gas main, there's a water main, and 2 sewer mains. So there's actually 4 different trenches. And we did a punch list with them. They know of the berms on the Bargastell Circle on both ends of that. They're going to reclaim into there. GCG will handle all that inspection, and they know the limits for all that type of work. The Middlesex Street, they're finished with that. That's at the sewer station at the end of Middlesex Street. They finished the fencing. They put the slats. I think if you drive by it, and that was a request from the neighbor, and they gave into that. The only thing left there, they paved the driveway. They've cleaned that whole area up. The only thing that has to be done there is the plantings for the bushes will be done in the fall. Because if they get put in now, they're just going to die. Middlesex Street, they abandoned the old sewer main. They came in and they flow filled. There was a lot of discussion about that. They did not want to do that. And myself and Mike Carter did, much back and forth with them of the idea of they just wanted to fill the manholes in with sand. And over time, they would have just washed out. And they finally gave in. Ted and Scott, they realized what we were asking for, and they did that. So that part of Exchange Street, that's all they were required to do. I know there was a lot of people, questioning that they were supposed to go curb to curb with milling it. That was never in the planning board decision. It was never on the select board's sewer extension. It was to be, fixed trench pavement from center line to the end. If we look at, maybe in the next couple of years, the town can, mill and pave the other side. Most of it was, taken care of, though. It's not as bad as it was before, because they fixed the trench part where the old sewer was. So we are looking to start the 20th.
Yeah, if they actually start the 20th, that'll be a first.
Yep.
But start where they said they were going to start. But we'll look forward.
They've been starting every week for the past, so
right.
they eventually got to start sooner. Well, that's lining up with our pavement, with you approving our pavement.
Sure.
So he's going to come in and he's going to reclaim Island Road either on the 20th, or he's going to start there.
Okay, well, I think it's also important, again, going back to telling people about things in terms of the website. I think it's important for us to give an update tonight on road work, whether it's paid for by Chapter 90 or other, so people are aware of what's going to happen.
Sure.
And hopefully we can execute this project and all the other projects. Okay.
So I'll ask Karen, I'll put it on the DPW website, and then she can tie the link into the Facebook page tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
May I make one quick comment, please? Jim, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Jim, would you ask that when they resurface, to please put down a decent tack coat? I'm noticing where pavement pulls up, typically where they put down, the tack coat is less than desirable in the way they put it down. And if we get a good tack coat, I think we'll find much better bonding for the new surface that goes on. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the next item we have on our agenda. I noticed from the app here, which I'm looking at on my wife's cell phone, that Mr. American has in fact logged in. Is that true? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's hold off on that. There's one other item before we get to the.
And you're a little early, Jim. It's only 8:21.
Well, no, I was going to try to do the South End Farm, but let's go to the entry request for 12 to 14 Exchange Street. Mr. Kaczynski.
This should be quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can make this brief. In the board's packet is a right-of-way agreement with Millis Homes LLC. This agreement was composed by town council, and it would grant the town access to the property at 12 to 14 Exchange Street for the purpose of accessing wells for testing as required by the Mass DEP. This issue goes back at least 4 or 5 years. The town has been trying to get access to this property to do some testing, and I think we have come to an agreement with the current owner of the property so that we can conduct testing as part of a Phase 2 investigation and comprehensive site assessment. There was no charge to the town for this right of entry. So I'll be asking the board this evening to authorize the chair to sign a right of way agreement, so the town can move ahead with this testing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, was that all? Oh, I'm sorry, Karen,
Mr.
yes.
Chair, yeah, I just wanted to add, so this actually goes back, as Mike said, even further than him. This went back to when Mr. Aspinwall was still a town administrator. There were some issues with some hazmat that was found. They had to add additional wells. They had to put additional wells in for testing, and unfortunately, at that time, the individual that owned 12 to 14 Exchange Street, we were unable to contact. We were unable to get access to the site. So that's why this has gone on for such a long time. Finally, the property has been sold. We're in the process of being sold, which is why we're back looking at this now, because the DEP, we have to fulfill a DEP requirement. So that's kind of the quick 2 cents on why we're doing this now.
Okay. So we have a tentative agreement with the landowner to get access so we can do the testing. That's the bottom line, right?
Right,
That's
so at
correct.
this point, we just need we needed official approval to go onto the private property so we can finish this and finish up with the DEP.
So, any questions from the board members? I would take a motion then to approve the right-of-way agreement.
I move, go ahead.
I'll move that we approve the right-of-way agreement for 12 to 14 Exchange Street for the purposes of testing as part of Phase 2 investigation comprehensive site assessment for the chair to sign.
Second.
So moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
motion's carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Now, what time is it?
824.
24.
Okay,
You could do the
Mr. American is
47
on. I
South
will
End.
move to the approval for Lot 47 of the South End Farm Land Disturbance Permit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But there he is. Okay. Thank you, Mr. American.
Hold on, what
Good
the-
evening, Dan American, Legacy Engineering, here on behalf of the owner of Lot 47 in South End Farm on Frontier Lane. It's one of the last few lots that hasn't been developed yet, and he basically has a different house than we had. That's it right there.
I'm trying to find the, it's all right, that's okay, go ahead.
Go down one page.
Yeah, I don't,
That's it.
problem is the PDF, I don't know if I can turn it.
I could throw it up if you want.
If you could, that'd be great. You want to share
Yeah,
your
if you
screen
want
with
to
us?
unshare yours, and I'll share mine.
Nice.
Right-click it and you'll get a rotate.
Even if it's a PDF?
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, look at this. Oh, that's nice. I
Looks
always
really
worry about the
great on an
PDFs.
iPhone, I can tell you that.
Can you read it? It's not very, yeah. We're trying.
Okay, so you guys issued a stormwater land disturbance permit for this back in 2017, May 10th, and it had a different house and a different driveway configuration, and somebody bought it back then and then didn't end up going through with developing a lot, so we have a new lot owner now. They have a different house configuration, and basically what your permit says, and if some of you will recall, the South End Farm subdivision had a requirement that 30% of every lot be left in a unlandscaped condition. It's called a natural preservation area. And we appeared before the board with every lot in the subdivision to present the plan to you, and you guys issued us a permit for each lot. And the permit says that we can reconfigure the natural preservation area with the permission of the select board. So that's what I'm here tonight to ask you for. It's the exact same square footage. It's just a different configuration. In the original design, we had natural preservation to the left of the house and to the right of the house. In this design, we have a little less to the left and more to the right, but it's the same amount of natural preservation area. So I think all we need is really just a vote of the board and maybe a letter to memorialize that vote.
So a vote to accept the plan, the revised plan for, what is it?
Dated.
47.
Yeah, dated. Yeah. April 24th, 2020.
From the board members?
I have no problem with it.
We do have an email from the Board of Health indicating that they have no problem with it either, that the system is still going to work fine, the septic system, etc. Okay. I'm just trying to get the right paperwork here. Okay. So, any questions from Ms. Underhill?
No.
All right, well then I'm going to make a motion here that the board approve the revised house site plan for lot 47 at South End Farm under the land disturbance permit that was issued, it says a while ago. Is there a better date now?
May 10th, 2017.
And 2017. Is there a second?
Second. Sorry.
So it's been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. So we got the approval for lot 47. Any idea when the house is going to be built?
They're itching to go. They've been waiting for your blessing.
Well, we give them our blessing and we look forward to sending them a tax bill.
Okay.
He's so subtle.
Not immediately, but they do know it's going to go up a bit, right?
They do, yes.
Okay. All right, well, I can song and dance, or I can ask for a quick jump to approval of the water sewer commitments, because we have a minute to go before my clock says 8:30.
That's an easy one.
And the other subjects of committee appointments will take a little bit longer.
I'll move that we approve the water sewer commitment for June 2020 in the amount of $4,755.62.
Second.
The move and seconded for the board to approve the water sewer department commitment to the collector for June of 2020 in the amount of $4,755.62. Discussion. I'll roll call. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Okay, it's now officially 8:30
All right.
on my official count.
It is.
So we'll move now to the board discussion of the stormwater and land disturbance permit application for Emerson Place. Now, this is a hearing where the board will take testimony from the applicant, ask questions of the applicant. We will also take testimony from the town's engineer, which is Beta, and Melissa, I think, is here tonight, even though she's on vacation, I believe.
I'm here.
That's one of the great things of Zoom. We can find people wherever they are. So this is a hearing, and then we will also have the opportunity for any testimony or reaction from the public, including the abutters, all of whom have been informed of the time of this hearing, and they have been given the opportunity to weigh in and discuss the proposal accordingly. So what I will ask as we begin is to have, well, actually what I'll do is I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion that the select board open the hearing for stormwater hearing for Emerson Place, stormwater permit application and land disturbance application.
Second.
Been moved to open the hearing. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
All right, so the hearing is now officially open, and I would ask, just as a way of introduction, this is a matter that has been going on for many months, as it turns out, and there's been a lot of work done with Mr. American and his firm, with our architects, our engineers as well, Beta. There's been a tremendous amount of work done with the planning board, who's also involved in the process, as well as the Board of Health. It's our job tonight to take testimony and then perhaps act upon the stormwater permit and the land disturbance permit. So it is wide-ranging in scope, I guess, but it's quite precise in what the task is. We're not here to second-guess any other board. We're here to do our job. So with that said, I'm going to turn the speaking engagement here over to Mr. American, who can tell us a little bit about what is being proposed for this area and what he's asking our board to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Dan American, Legacy Engineering, here on behalf of the applicant. Karen, if you could put up the existing conditions one that you
I
have
will.
there.
Hold on.
Yep.
Here we go. Hold on.
We'll just give you an overview of the existing condition of the site. So this is a 61 and change acre piece of land. It's actually a bunch of pieces of land, several different
There you go.
owners that the applicant has put together into a proposed open space subdivision, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. In the existing condition, we have wetland areas around the fringes of the property. You can see those hatched off. To the left is the Great Black Swamp. To the right is a wetland area that lies between our upland areas and Ridge Street. The existing site consists of some wooded areas, an old gravel pit, and some field areas. So, Karen, if you could open the
I'm
proposed
trying to make this.
condition.
Hold on. What's that? All right, sorry, Dan, say that again.
File.
Doesn't want to do what I want it to, but it's... There you go.
There's another
A little
file
slow
that
on
I
the
sent you.
uptake here. All right, do you want to look at the other one?
Yes, please.
All right, so forget this. Let's try this one. Proposed conditions? There you go.
This is what we're proposing to do. We're
Alright,
proposing
trying
to
to
do an open space subdivision.
Come on, man.
What an open space subdivision is, just for reference purposes, the zoning in this area normally requires 25,000 square foot lots. Under an open space subdivision, the planning board by special permit can authorize smaller lot sizes, 15,000 square foot lots with reduced frontages, with the goal of reducing the footprint of the proposed development, reducing the size of the lots, reducing the amount of landscape area, reducing the amount of roadway necessary to service those lots. So last year, the planning board did issue us a special permit to pursue an open space subdivision on this property. And we have gone through the definitive subdivision process with the planning board, and they have approved it. So what we're here before you tonight, because we're disturbing more than an acre of land, we are here to seek a land disturbance permit and a stormwater permit, which fall under your regulations. And those regulations basically pertain to the design of the stormwater management system, and then sediment and erosion control systems to make sure that the proposed work will not cause erosion or sedimentation into surrounding areas, and to make sure that the completed condition of the development will meet applicable stormwater regulations, including your own regulations, which are modeled after Mass DEP stormwater regulations. So, I mean, I could go through all the nuance and detail with you if you want. We have 3 roads proposed. The long one down the middle is May Road. And then we have 2 little 500-foot dead-end roads. The light green areas are the areas that are going to be developed for the lots. The dark green areas and the white areas around the fringes of that are areas that are going to remain open space, so undeveloped. So 41 and change acres of the 61 acres of land is going to remain open space. And that consists of wetland areas and then undisturbed wooded areas around our houses. A homeowners association will be created. That homeowners association will be responsible for maintaining the drainage system outside of the roads and the open space. So the homeowners association will own the open space, and they will manage and operate the open space. So it'll be private property, accessible by the people who live in this development. The 4 blue areas that you see on the plan are the 4 proposed stormwater basins. We have designed a stormwater management system that consists of the normal arrangement of catch basins in the streets with manholes and pipes that collect and divert the runoff into one of our 4 stormwater basins. Those basins have pretreatment systems, and they're designed to comply with your stormwater management standards and the state stormwater management standards. Beta has reviewed our drainage design as part of they're doing the review for all the different boards in town. And they generated many comments about our stormwater design. We responded, provided a couple of rounds of revised plans and stormwater reports, and we've gotten to a point where Beta is comfortable with the stormwater management system design for the project. We have a comprehensive sediment and erosion control plan that's part of the subdivision plan itself. There's perimeter erosion controls, there are temporary sediment basins. We also have a document in the stormwater report called a SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, which is an EPA mandated kind of standardized document that talks about all the kind of nitty-gritty details of how you conduct yourself when you're building a project of this nature, and how you maintain and manage sediment and erosion control throughout the course of the project. So again, I think that I won't speak for Melissa, but based on the comments we've received so far, I think that we've gotten those issues squared away. So if the board has any questions about this project, for me, I'm happy to answer them. I can pull up more detailed plans if you want and go through any areas that you have any specific questions or comments on. We are done with the planning board. We're still working with the Conservation Commission, and the Board of Health likes to vote their approval last after everybody else has voted their approval. So we are pretty much squared away with them, but they will vote. They will wait to vote until everybody else has voted to approve the project.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have some, and then we'll turn to the Beta folks to talk a little bit about the latest correspondence they had with us. I just want to make sure that it's clear from this map. The first map you put up showed an area which is the entire parcel. What this is doing is showing us the portion of the parcel that is affected by your development, which means the other pieces, which are gray, but still are within the property line, are left undisturbed. Is that what's happening?
No, actually, only the areas here that are the roads and the individual lots are going to be disturbed. Aside from a little bit of stormwater work, the areas in the dark green are not going to be disturbed.
Okay, but the property line that appeared on the prior slide, I don't have it, if I got it right, there's actually 2 access points, if you will, to Ridge Street.
There is a second access out to Ridge Street that is not going to be utilized.
Right, so that the property is, I guess it's gray on this map. What is going to happen to that?
That's a wetland. Nothing will happen to it.
So that's like
stay
out
as is.
On there.
Yep.
So this is the parcel. The wetlands are there. There won't be any development on that portion of the parcel, either from this program or another one, because of wetlands restrictions. Right. And the rest of the parcel, as you've outlined in color, is the part that is going to be developed, which includes components that are not developed, basically. And the road access is from, is it Paddock?
We have 2 access points. We have one from Rolling Meadow.
Rolling Meadow.
Rolling Meadow is fully developed subdivision except for one lot, which was left vacant for this express purpose of bringing a road into this backland. Because it's the same family who developed Rolling Meadow and Paddock own a big chunk of this development.
Okay.
And the second one is off of Ridge Street.
Is on to Orchard Street. I'm sorry, Ridge Street. Yep. And that is just, I know I guess it's south, is it, or west of Curve?
It's just south. It's south of Curve Street of 150, 200 feet or so.
So that orients the property. And then the proposal here is for the lots, as you outlined, as well as the stormwater mitigation strategies and also the undeveloped parcel here. Now, I think you said it, but I want to make sure I understand. The green here is going to be owned by a homeowners association. Is that right?
The dark green and all of the gray that you were talking about around the fringes, the wetland areas, is going to be owned by a homeowners association.
The homeowners association will ultimately be the owner, and individual property owners will own the lots and the houses, and they will be members of the homeowners association.
Correct.
And there's 43 of them. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I'll now ask my colleagues if they have questions. Mr. Germain?
He's on mute.
Oh, you're muted, Pete. Hold on, maybe I can fix it. Can you?
Not at this moment, but I am a little concerned about the traffic, but that's a different issue at this stage.
Okay. Ms. Underhill?
I don't have anything specific just yet.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. American. Now what I would like to do is I'd like to turn over to Melissa, who can talk to us a little bit about correspondence that we received, dated, the last piece of correspondence was dated, where do I have it here? June 19th of 2020. Those of you who don't know Melissa Rico, she is our engineer extraordinaire. She works for all of us, including Planning Board, Board of Health, and Board of Selectmen, also known as Select Board, sorry. And, you know, frankly, that was an innovation for us over the last couple of years to have a single point of entry so that the developers would have some, you know, one set of engineering skills to deal with. So if you have a minute, take a minute and just talk a little bit about the letter that you sent to us. Again, there's several letters for the purposes of this conversation, but this is the last one, which is June 19th.
Sure. Melissa Ricos with Beta Group. As Mr. McCafferty said, we've been working on this for quite a few months now with the planning board. Started with the planning board, Board of Health doing all review, including stormwater review. So this is the second letter that we sent specifically to the select board. And in it, you'll see that all of our questions, comments, concerns, issues have been resolved as far as stormwater goes and the project in general at this point. One thing I guess I'll point out that the board might be interested in is the homeowners association will have responsibility going forward in perpetuity for maintenance of the stormwater infiltration basins, the 4 basins. If and when the street is accepted by the town, that's the intention, then the town will take over ownership of the road and the catch basins, the infrastructure within the right-of-way of the road. But the homeowners association will keep the maintenance responsibility for the individual infiltration basins as well as 2 proprietary units that are within the right-of-way of the street. So note that as far as who's responsible for maintenance in the long term. The O&M plan does, identify that any change in Go ahead.
O&M is?
Operation and maintenance plan for the stormwater.
Yep.
So that is important for the town. One thing, and it's more of a housekeeping item, is there's one waiver request. The stormwater regs, or the stormwater regulations of the select board ask for the applicant to indicate the location of trees, anything over 12 inches caliber, diameter, and the specimen of the trees. But on a project this size, that would be quite a task. So there's a waiver request for that particular item from the plans.
And that's a big, because there's a lot of trees. Is that the idea?
Correct.
So in order for us to approve, we would have to approve this waiver if we were going to go forward with the application.
Correct.
Or the application would include a waiver of this particular rule.
Yes.
Have we done that on any other project?
I don't think we have. Glen Ellen might have. That's the only one of of this size, which was quite a while ago.
Right.
But most of the projects aren't, that have been before you recently are not this large.
Okay.
And then the last section of the letter, starting at the bottom of page 3, mostly on page 4, I just listed out the recommended conditions that we've identified through our other boards' reviews. So these are conditions that are already being included in the planning board's, has already been included in the planning board's decision. And then there's one, C7 is being included in the Board of Health, EHIR. None of these are specific to the select board. I don't have any additional conditions just based on the select board's regulation. But these are conditions that the other boards are including in their decisions that I thought the select board might be interested in seeing or potentially including.
Well, we could include these in our permit, and they would be consistent with what the other boards have indicated, but it would give the town some additional enforcement opportunity, frankly.
Okay.
In our permit, we could act on it as well. Okay. Can you just spend a minute or two, if you can? I know this is, big picture in terms of the actual strategy here, which is really, on this picture, the blue things, those catch basins and whatnot. I mean, can you characterize the nature of this stormwater mitigation strategy in, very, very high level so that we can understand and the public can understand, and then generally why is this a good idea to do it this way?
So this is pretty standard practice for this type of a subdivision, to capture the runoff in catch basins in the street, to pipe that to infiltration basins around the perimeter of the property. Those will retain up to the 100-year storm. There'll be a little bit of overflow in the 100-year storm, and there's that water will then discharge back towards the wetlands in the back of the properties, not towards any of the homeowners or abutters per se. So the idea is that you infiltrate as much of the stormwater as you can locally, and keep it in place. This is good for the town's water supply. Recharging groundwater is how the EPA and our stormwater permits want to handle stormwater. So that's the general idea. Those two proprietary separators are in the roadway where you could not put an infiltration basin, and the purpose of those is to treat the water that's coming off the street before it gets discharged to the stream. They're down by the intersection with Ridge Street. So that's why those two units are there in the road. So yeah, that's.
Is it? I don't know if the parcel is exactly compatible, but the developed north of this, the Paddock Lane and whatnot, Rolling Meadow. Is this similar? I mean, those homes, some of the homes really butt right onto the back of the Black Swamp. Is this a similar kind of thing, right?
Well, there's actually, I don't know if you can tell from this plan, but right off of Paddock Lane, behind those 3 houses that are kind of on the cul-de-sac there is an infiltration basin there that exists today for that development. So that was a similar design right there.
Paddock and Bolton was not an open space subdivision, so that was designed basically the entire piece of property was chopped up into lots, meeting the normal lot size requirements of the zone.
So they're much bigger lots, therefore
it's more spread out.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
You have more. This gives you less impervious area too, I think, because you have less roadway and whatnot to maintain.
So the bottom line is less impervious area then.
Yep.
Than if we had whatever the square footage was required. Not that it could fit there because of the wetlands. Okay, I get it. I don't want to hog the conversation. I'd like to ask for Mr. Germain and Ms. Underhill to weigh in and with their questions. So, Mr. Germain?
I do have a couple of questions. The first one is I see relief lines. Can you give me some idea of what the elevation is where the homes are going in above the standard level of the Black Swamp area? I mean, I can see relief lines. What are the gradations on those lines? 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet?
Well, there's no, on the plan, which plan are you looking at?
The one that's on our screen. It's the only one I
Yours,
have
what
right
do you
now.
mean?
So
Well, those are just buffer zone lines. Those are not contour lines. So
they are not.
no, the Black Swamp is generally ranges in elevation from 135 to 138.
And this subdivision.
Our subdivision grades, the grades of our roads are in the vicinity of 150. I'm just looking at some grades now, 150. The two short roads are right around 150. The center of the long road is 150. When you go up a little further north, we're up at 152. Go a little further south, and we are at 148. So we're anywhere from 10 to 15 feet higher than the Great Black Swamp.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. And is the contractor going to build up a bit or make sure the basements don't go down? I understand, I was just reading about your concerns there, but I am concerned when you get to this level that with a substantial storm, such as a hurricane or something coming through, you could have water levels in the swamp that come up 3, 4, 5 feet, and you could theoretically be into the basements of these homes. Because
none of the basements of these homes would be that deep. So what happens here, just at a kind of a big picture level, is that the areas to the left side of your picture there, where the two short roads are, that's an old gravel pit. The groundwater conditions over there, for the most part, are very much consistent with the water elevations in the Great Black Swamp. And we're up, in those areas, we're up 12, 15 feet above the swamp. So the basements in those areas are not going to get down to an elevation where they would be in the vicinity of the range of elevations in the swamp.
I guess quick calculation says that they could be 4 to 6 feet above. But,
correct. And then to the right, what we have is we have a wetland system on the right side that's higher than the Great Black Swamp because we have some tighter soils under that wetland area, which is why it's a wetland area. So the homes along there will be even higher because we're going to want to be up above that. So we have, Melissa has drafted condition C7, which basically says that under normal conditions, basement should be 2 feet above high groundwater. We would go out and dig a test hole at every house foundation and determine seasonal high groundwater. I'm a certified soil evaluator, so is your Board of Health director. We would go out and we would make a determination for every single house in the subdivision what high groundwater is. And under normal circumstances, the basement we place 2 feet above high groundwater. We do have a reworded version of C7 that's before the Board of Health, giving the applicant some additional flexibility in areas where a foundation drain, a sump pump, or a gravity foundation drain might be a useful option as opposed to, building a house on top of the ground and having to import, 6, 7 feet of fill around the house, which is not a great arrangement. I think Beta and I are on the same page on that. The wording of this has changed. It basically says that in any circumstance where I, as the design engineer, would want to place a basement within 2 feet of high groundwater, and that would only occur in the areas on the right side of this plan where the groundwater is perched up above the Great Black Swamp, that we would have to present, the proposed elevation and the basement drainage system. It's basically you put a system of crushed stone and pipe, perforated pipe underneath the basement, and you discharge it out through a gravity drain, or you have a sump pump. It's pretty common. something that the building code allows for. So I think, there's going to be a situation here where on a half a dozen or so of these lots on the right side of the plan where we might entertain that notion of having basements within 2 feet of groundwater, not in groundwater, but within 2 feet of high groundwater. And in any circumstance where we did that, we would have to provide a basement drainage system.
Okay. In terms of buried utilities, sewer, water, gas, whatever, you're going to come down the road. Again, is there any proviso in place based on the fact that you're going to be digging down? I don't know what the depth is they go to, but my guess is they could be down, again, closer to the groundwater level, and what's the impact on those facilities?
The only places that we're going to be anywhere near groundwater with our utilities, our deepest utility is 7 feet in the ground. And we're up, like I said, 12, 15 feet above the Great Black Swan. So the only places where we're going to encounter any significant groundwater is at the 2 wetland crossings. And we are building up the grade at those 2 crossings by several feet. So we don't actually have to go as deep into the ground. But in those areas, there's a dewatering plan. The contractor will devise a specific dewatering plan. It's identified in the stormwater pollution prevention plan that they'll have to develop a dewatering plan. That's something that we'll present to the planning board, and Beta will end up reviewing that as well prior to construction. And Beta is going to be out doing inspections for all the utility installations as part of their role in the planning board for the major utilities, and also, for water and sewer. I think Beta will be doing the inspections for those installations as well. So they're going to be on site observing all of this.
Thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
I have one question. Is it typical for projects such as this to have those basins be the responsibility of a homeowners association?
Yes, the town does not want to maintain them. So they basically, the practice in Millis and other, different towns handle it different ways. Some towns require individual lot owners to maintain whatever's on their lot. The practice in Millis, for as long as these regulations have been around, was to require that an association be created, and that the association would be responsible for maintaining the basins. And, maintenance of these basins basically amounts to mowing it a couple times a year and making sure the outlets are free and clear and not obstructed. There's really not a lot of work and effort that goes into maintenance of these. These are open grass basins that are anywhere from 2 to 3 feet deep. They're not these big kind of, ponded areas. They're pretty low profile, and most of the time they just look like a grassed area.
Okay. And so is anybody responsible for inspecting those on any kind of a schedule?
Yeah, they're in the operation and maintenance plan. There is a provision to do annual inspections. So the association would be responsible for those inspections.
Okay.
There are, I can just add, there are in the plans and in the operation and maintenance identified easements over the drainage basins as well, so that if the town for some reason needed to go look at them or do some maintenance because something was not going well with the homeowners association, they have easements to do that and means to recoup expenses for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's standard fare. We've done a couple of these on big projects, and town council is in the process of reviewing our association documents, and it includes provisions that allows the town to enter, if maintenance isn't being done by the association, then charge the association for that cost of that maintenance.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more question?
Mr. Germain?
When you're preparing these foundations and so forth, the land around there, presumably, and I may be incorrect, this was old swampland at one time. I don't know how deep you have to go to get good, firm, stable soil but is that a consideration so you don't have any slumping or anything else going on, sinking of the foundations once the homes are built?
So we dug a bunch of test holes out here, and it's actually not filled wetland. There's only one location where we actually found any evidence of fill. So that's not going to be an issue. The foundations are all going to bear on natural soils. This is old farmland. I mean, everything in Massachusetts at one point in time was old farmland. But, the area where the two small roads are, that's an old gravel pit. We dug test holes out there. We got down 12, 15, 16 feet. It's all beautiful sand and gravel, great stuff to build a road or foundation or a stormwater basin on. The stuff to the right is more of a glacial till, but it's all natural. There's all natural soil layers in there, so nothing is compromised.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions from board members? I would ask if the town administrator or the DPW director have anything they would like to ask, and then I'm going to invite the public to comment.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything. I think the board covered it very well. Thank you.
And same, Mr. Chairman. I think Dan explained the everything's going to be owned by the homeowners association, the retention basins, all that. I mean, that is a common practice that we do. The Caltech systems that are going to be in the roadway, they're very expensive for us to fix, repair, replace, and it's just going to be the cost of living in this development.
Okay, great, thank you. So, again, this is a public hearing, and the board will look for comments from the public. Bear with me because I'm dealing with this in a somewhat constrained manner. Since I can't get my laptop to work, I'm using a cell phone. So, if someone would like to speak, I don't know, Karen, can you see who they are?
I can see.
I'd like to be able to offer them the opportunity to speak, but I don't know how to call on them. I guess that's what I'm saying.
All right, let me see if there's anyone interested? Nope. Nobody is saying anything, so I don't think you do have any comments from the public. Is that true? Anyone?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi, Chair. My name is Mike Chu. I live at 68 Ridge Street.
There you
How
go.
are you all doing tonight?
Good.
Thank you for taking my questions here. I've got a few related to the change in engineering plans to switch from leaving the existing culverts near my property and changing them to precast concrete culverts. So I'll go ahead and direct these to the developer's engineer here. Previously, in the Concom meetings, you had mentioned that any precast culvert that you install would have adjustable weirs to allow for variable flow. Could you elaborate a little bit and tell me how you plan on establishing that baseline water level, and how any modifications during post-construction or any change of that baseline would be adjusted with this weir that you're showing on your plans?
Mr. American?
Sure. Thank you. So for the board's reference, at the north, there are 3 existing streams. At the north end on Paddock Lane, there's an existing stream that passes under an existing gravel road, and there's a 24-inch pipe there. So not uncommon to what you might see on a lot of your roads that you operate. On the south end, out by Ridge Street, there's where Mr. Chu lives. He lives on basically directly opposite Curve Street. That house, that's his home. So down there, there's 2 existing stream channels, and these are old farming ditches. And there's an existing gravel driveway that extends from Ridge Street along the path of our proposed road, and it extends up into the farm that's to the south of us. Those 2, under those 2 crossings, are these old granite culverts. So it's a box culvert made out of big chunks of rock, as far as we can tell. So the way conservation works with their regulations is when you cross the wetland, and we're crossing in two places on the north and the south, they want to see those old culverts go away. So that's called the Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards. It's a series of recommended design practices for crossing a stream. They don't want to see a small little pipe or a small little culvert made out of stone. They want to see a big, open, concrete culvert. So what we have proposed in those three locations is a concrete culvert that's maybe 11, 12 feet wide. It's open bottomed, so it has three sides, two sides and a top, no bottom. And then in the bottom, you basically rebuild the stream channel that used to be there before, in these cases, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 100 years ago, maybe more, they were filled in and replaced with either a pipe or they were replaced with these old granite culverts. So the way that we have an obligation and responsibility to control our stormwater discharge off-site. So these streams lead to abutting properties. And they, in the north, we're basically discharging to the Great Black Swamp, which is, owned by the Army Corps, but nonetheless, we still have an obligation to control our discharges there. On the south, there are 3 or 4 homes to the south of us before that stream channel discharges out to the Great Black Swamp. So the way that we are controlling the flows, and we've provided a whole set of drainage calculations that discuss this, is in the bed of the channel underneath the culvert that we're doing is we're casting a concrete rear wall that has a notch in it. And the notch is designed to allow for low flows to go through in the same manner that they pass through the existing culverts today. So it's basically designed to mimic the existing pipes and granite stone culverts that are there today. Now, adjacent to Mr. Q's land, those 2 culverts, there's no stream on the south side of our road. It's culverted. So we are only addressing the part of the stream channel that falls under our road. So we're putting an open box culvert under our road in those 2 locations. But on the south side, the old culvert is still going to be there. So effectively, there's really almost no change in drainage patterns in there because that old culvert is going to control the flow like it has today, like it has for the last 100 years. So they're not, the rear walls that we're proposing in these stream channels, they're not adjustable. They are just, it's a fixed concrete wall that's 8 inches wide that has a certain notch in it that's been designed to mimic existing drainage patterns. So there'd be no significant change in existing drainage patterns to the south of us or on our side or on the land adjacent to Mr. Q's property, or in his property for that matter, because one of these streams runs right through his backyard.
I guess before I go back to the Mr. Ware, I'd like to make sure that Melissa agrees with that. Is that consistent? You support that explanation?
That's consistent with what's shown on the plans and what the drainage calculations show.
Meets the drainage standards.
Correct. The flow pre and post condition match.
Okay.
At the stream locations.
Further questions, sir?
Yes, I'm just looking at the wetland detail that's associated with plans here, C31. And I'm just keying in on what you just said, Dan, about the existing culverts being left in place, but you show the rear walls on the south side of May Road.
Yep.
So you guys are only going to install the precast culverts to the extent of the width of May Road, the 15-foot wide, and then you're just going to leave the stone where you find it? How do you plan on joining those 2 pieces of infrastructure?
So on the south side of these 2 crossings is our existing underground culverts. So we are going to build our new culverts for the width of our road. no further. And at the south end of it, there's going to be a cast concrete wall at the end with an orifice cast into that matches exactly the existing culverts. And then to the south of us, the two stream channels are culverted on private property. That's land that we don't control, so we can't change those. Those exist today, and they would stay in place.
So along the same lines of the O&M discussion, who would maintain these culverts? Essentially, what you're creating is a big void underneath May Road, and there's going to be a choke, which is the existing culvert. I can foresee all kinds of stuff getting into that big void underneath the road and stopping the flow of your stormwater drainage to the butter to the south. And I can foresee issues with stormwater building up with clogged culverts onto my property. Who maintains the culverts, Dan?
So that's the question that, in terms of maintenance, not only of the stormwater mitigation on site, but down this road as well. So who is responsible for that?
Well, that item is not specifically addressed in the O&M. That's something that we can address in the O&M. I don't have any issue with having the association be responsible for that.
So I guess a follow-up question would be, when this thing's all said and done, and there is a condition where there is stormwater kind of swelling up and building up onto my property, who do I call? Do I call the town first? Do I call the subdivision? Would that be specified in the O&M as well?
So at this point, Dan, is it addressed at all? I think you said no.
It's not. So the way it's written presently, when the town takes over the road, they take over everything in the road, including the culverts, except for the two proprietary treatment units, which the association will continue to maintain. We certainly could update the O&M plan to talk about these culverts, if that's something the board wants us to do.
Well, Mr. McKay, I mean, in fact, the road becomes the property of the town, and the town therefore takes on additional responsibility for culvert cleaning. Is that going to be something that we would like to see from the developer addressed a little bit more directly?
I would suggest that that it would be added that the homeowners association would maintain even that culvert, especially there. And to address some of the as a taxpayer, you have a right to first grieve your grievance to the town. The town has a right to go after the homeowners association if they don't pay it. We've done that in many other instances on other projects that for instances that, sewer backups and stuff like that the town came in, fixed it, and then went after the homeowners association for payment on that.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just rephrase that solution. The solution, if that's the case, is the town owns the land on the road, and the town is responsible for the culvert. So the homeowners and abutters would come to the town for relief, but the town would then have some opportunity to go back to the homeowners association and say, look, you guys are responsible for paying for this, which is different from who's going to actually go out there and avoid these problems by periodically, we talked about earlier, examining them annually or whatever to make sure we don't have any clogs.
So, yes, and I'd also, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in there as well. Another one of my questions going back to a previous meeting was that Beta had brought up some type of MassDOT requirement for inspection on bridges that might pertain to these culverts. Has there been additional further discussion about MassDOT regulation, inspection, and maintenance on these culverts as it relates to these culverts?
So there's a condition included in the planning board decision that the final structural drawings that still need to be provided prior to construction for the culverts be designed according to Mass DOT guidelines and documents to meet their requirements.
But that's a separate. I'm asking about the inspection. It sounded like MassDOT had a routine or a regimen of inspection as it relates to these crossings across the state. If they're built to those construction documents and standards, is the inspection and the maintenance of these pieces of infrastructure also along with pertain to the infrastructure, or no?
Not through Mass DOT. They, if it's over 10 feet, it's considered a bridge and something that the town would be responsible for letting Mass DOT that it exists on a town-owned road, and then DOT would put it on a list and potentially come out and look at it if they choose to. And at that time, if it didn't meet DOT standards, then they could ask the town to upgrade it in some way, which is what that condition in the planning board decision was, trying to avoid that responsibility falling on the town. So it's not an a routine maintenance type of inspection through DOT. Routine maintenance would be something that the town or the homeowners association would need to be responsible for.
So the question is that inspection addressed in the O&M as well? And it probably isn't. Should it be? Should it be?
Well, there's nothing to address in the O&M portion of it. The way this is, our traffic consultant has weighed in on this topic. They've consulted with Mass DOT. Mass DOT does not get involved in the design of these kind of small culverts. It's not something that they subject to their review. It's not something that they subject to bridge design review processes. They don't get involved in that. So I think Melissa's comment is at some point, if the town notifies Mass DOT that these things exist, they might come out and do an inspection, and she just wants to be sure that the way they're designed comports with the way Mass DOT normally requires these kinds of things to be built. So that's a condition of the planning board approval. That we have to have our structural engineer document that information.
Okay, I understand. But my question is, and my comment is, if the O&M procedures don't include inspection of these culverts, I think we should consider putting them in. But the chair's comment was, what do we do to avoid a situation where my property might get flooded out? Routine maintenance and inspection of those culverts will ensure my property doesn't get flooded out.
Okay, so we just said that we would revise the O&M plan to require the association to do inspections of the culvert.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that we're coming down to sort of the responsibility for inspection, which is avoiding problems, and then the responsibility for mitigation if the problem should nevertheless arise. And, from the town's point of view, from the stormwater utilities perspective, which is really what I'm interested in as well, to the extent that the developer and the homeowners are taking some responsibility, we ought to have that documented. I agree with the comment from the prior speaker that we'd like to see that. And this is my view. The board will have to decide tonight how we would like to address that. But going back to Mr. McKay, it is a reasonable solution. Responsibility for inspection and mitigation, with the ability to call upon the homeowners association to foot the bill. I'm not comfortable with the notion that the DOT is going to come out and look at this. Not that I'm having any disrespect for them, but if the local stormwater enterprise can't monitor it, then we got a problem.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, quickly, this box culvert that Dan we've used them. The town's already used them in two different areas. We've used them on Farm Street, this exact type. We didn't put a weir in that, but that type of box. And at the Fish and Game Club right on at the end of Ridge Street, same type of culvert that Dan's talking about, that we box cement culvert that we use there. As part of stormwater management, you as the Board of Selectmen have the right to inspect anything leading into anything that leads into infrastructure, meaning the DPW has the right to go out and inspect anything and impose fines. And that's in almost every homeowners association document. I know up on Greenwood Drive, that it was not maintained. And we went out, we made the homeowners association cut down and clean that detention basin. Reports are supposed to be filed, and maybe that's something we need to start enforcing, that when this area is cleaned and inspected, the reports are supposed to be filed and sent to the DPW, to the stormwater, so we can log the reports in. And again, we have the right to inspect it anytime we want. So if a homeowner calls up, there's people on this screen that have called up about different parts of retention basins in other developments that know that we have gone out and we do look at them, and if they're not clean, we call the association up, whoever's in charge of it, and tell them they have to clean up. They have to cut the grass and mow it so that it's operational.
Okay. Any other comments?
I've got additional comments and questions, if I may. In the planning board meeting, the developer and Dan presented 3 water services and sewers for future development on the south side of May Road, directly west of the culverts in question, or that we just talked about. How will the future development of these lots affect the stormwater management plan as designed? We have to go back and rework any parts of your stormwater management plan as it relates to Emerson Place?
Mr. American?
So there is, if you look at the south end of the property, you'll see that our proposed road for a pretty significant length directly abuts the property to the south, which is not part of our development. It's not part of the subdivision. It's currently a farm, a horse farm. That's not part of the development. So we did, because there is so much frontage there, recognizing that property owner could potentially divide off some lots, we did propose, as a prudent measure, to install 3 sets of sewer and water services there in the event that at some point they do decide to develop that land. They may not. I don't know. We're not, that's not part of this project. So at any future time, if they were going to disturb more than an acre of land, which I would imagine they would have to if they're going to do more than 2 lots, they would have to come before your board as a separate application under your regulations, and they would have to satisfy you as to comply.
Okay. Other questions, sir?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I muted myself because the AC's running now. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Melissa noted that the basins are designed for a 100-year rain event. And in the event a larger rain event occurred, the basins would push into existing wetland. The basin that is on May Road, on the southern end of the development, looks like there is a level spreader that would push into the wetland directly behind my house. Please confirm that is the plan. A 100-plus year rain event would push water towards the wetland directly behind my property and my wife's property. What is the plan to mitigate any type of damage that might occur on my property there?
Is that a question that's directed into Melissa, that she has a comment?
That question is to Dan, the engineer, because he's the one that developed the design.
So, standard engineering practice requires applicants and engineers to evaluate certain statistical storm events. And those events go up to the 100-year storm. And that's what the regulations require. We don't analyze 500-year storms or 300-year storms or 1,000-year storms. At some point, You don't design a drainage system to handle something that's so remote that it's not likely to ever see it in its lifetime. So the regulations that apply at the state level and in the town of Millis all require analysis of design storms up through and including the 100-year storm, which is what we've done.
Is there any way for the town to make the developer go design for 150-year? That's a question to anybody and everybody.
Yeah, I think that would have to be a bylaw change or something, the regulations. Zoning bylaws, I mean, that's what's in there, so.
The zoning bylaw is the one that we're using here, right?
Yes.
And the bylaw, it says what the zoning requirements are, so to stiffen them, we'd have to amend the bylaw. And we can't oppose that. Now, we could check that with town council if we feel as though that's something we'd like to just double check, but I don't think we can just arbitrarily impose additional restrictions.
Yeah, this is Melissa. In towns that we work in, you can revise your stormwater regulations to be, as stringent as you want, but that's a process, of updating your regulations. And I've never seen anybody require anything more than a 100-year storm. I have seen towns use different rainfall data. More conservative rainfall data would be one way to account for larger storm events, but I haven't seen it. I've never seen anybody require more than a 100-year storm for this type of development.
I'd also be concerned as to how you'd even set a regulation like that. How does anybody even know what a 150-year event is going to be?
Mm-hmm. Understood. Melissa, could you just said something, and I wanted you to please add a little bit more detail so I can understand. You said there's different sets of data for a 100-year event that are more conservative than, say, the conditions that were used to develop the stormwater management plan?
There's, it's rainfall data. There's different groups that come out with rainfall data, that's constantly updated. Cornell University comes out with rainfall data and updates it regularly. So I've seen towns update their regulations. And we'll recommend that sometimes that you update the regulations to refer to the latest Cornell rainfall data rather than rainfall data from 20, 30 years ago as climate is changing.
Is that a recommendation or an ask the town is willing to do on this project?
It's something that typically I think it's something that the town would consider if they are going to update their stormwater regulations in the future. But I don't think you could necessarily require a development, just kind of cherry pick a development and require them to do it without already having it in the stormwater regs. I think it would be something prudent to think about for the town to consider.
Understood. Thank you.
But if I could just rephrase, I mean, the issue that we're trying to deal with, has certainly, and I'm no scientist, legitimate scientific underpinning. But from a regulatory point of view, we have a responsibility to enforce our regulations. Developers come in and design programs and to meet those regulations. For us to change the regulation is certainly legitimate, but it's kind of like not after the fact. You really have to be proactive and prospective.
Correct. It would be something to do for going forward.
I want to make sure I give you all the opportunity you need to ask the questions, and anyone else who would like to ask a question, because it's important for the board to take this testimony into account when we decide what we're going to do with the actual permit request. I'm not hearing any further discussion. Just from a purely procedural point of view, because we are holding a public hearing, once we close the public hearing, the board may debate what resolution we want to take based upon the testimony that we receive. But further testimony is really not permitted from anyone else because we have to base our decision based upon the facts presented to us and the hearing, the information we gleaned from the hearing. So I want to make sure that anybody else who might want to say something, now's the time to do it. Because when we close the hearing, then we're going to move to discussion of how we want to proceed with the permit request. Okay, so I don't hear any further comment. Then I would make a motion that the board close the hearing for stormwater and land disturbance permit for 34 Emerson Place.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for the board to close the hearing. We'll poll the board for the vote on the hearing closure. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Okay, the motion is carried. Now the hearing is closed, and I will open for board conversation about the nature of the permit application, how we want to deal with it, how we may want to accept what's been proposed with the conditions that are that Melissa has proposed to us, or do we want to make some adjustments to it? So I'll open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Germain.
I think there are a couple of things that have come up. I do like the idea of potentially taking into consideration the Cornell estimates that this gentleman, Mr. Tu, I hope I pronounced it correctly, had brought up. If for no other reason than to at least examine that and be considerate of the concerns of individuals like him in the community. I'm also concerned with the ambiguity, if you will, of cleaning the culvert or whatever we're calling that now, and making sure that it is maintained and cleaned, and as to who has responsibility for that. It doesn't bother me if we say the DPW does, but do the homeowners then get billed for that work? And we need to figure that out. But I also think it's important that other homeowners know specifically who they can call if there's a problem, rather than saying, well, maybe I should call homeowners, maybe I should call the town. It would seem to me that we should make clear that they can call our DPW in town, and that we can then assume some responsibility for getting in touch with whomever is responsible, or if the DPW is responsible, they'll take it from that point on, but not leave it to the homeowner beyond that to have to worry about who do I get in touch with. The whole idea of the culverts and the maintenance of culverts, catch basins and everything, I think probably we should give some directions to, in terms of saying, again, no ambiguity, here's what we think ought to be a part of the approval of the process. At any rate, those are my takeaways at this point.
Ms. Underhill?
So once again, kind of piggybacking off of what Pete just said, I mean, it kind of sounds like, and I haven't been involved in the discussions of previous such types of developments, but if the town's going to be, if the town isn't directly responsible for the maintenance and inspection of those culverts, I mean, if it's not stated that the homeowners are in their association, then I would assume it would have to fall to the town, because it has to fall to somebody. So If that's not typically or shouldn't be a town function, then that should be included in the O&M.
Okay, well, I guess we're getting a sense certainly from the board that we're not necessarily fully comfortable with the specificity of what I'll call inspection and repair on a recurring basis, and who's going to do it and who's going to be ultimately responsible for it. Which I think it's, is it come down to a relook? I guess it's not C7 is about soil evaluation. Maybe it is, I don't know, maybe we need another condition here. I guess what I'm struggling with a little bit is I don't think that we feel as though there's enough specificity about the maintenance, inspection, maintenance, and mitigation of those culverts. And Mr. American, I think you indicated you're willing to work with us a little bit to see if we can come up with some language that would be acceptable.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you wanted to submit a condition of a condition in the permit that we submit a new O&M plan reflecting the fact that the association will be responsible for inspecting and maintaining those culverts, we're happy to do that.
And Mr. McKay, is that something that you think that is going to meet the needs here in terms of, I agree with my colleagues that ultimately the responsibility for being proactive here rests with the town, is my view. If the backstop is we put conditions requiring the homeowners association to take the initiative and we're going to watch over them, that's fine. But we're going to own the road, and we have a stormwater utility that's supposed to be responsible for stormwater mitigation along the road. So are you comfortable with the approach where we define in the O&M the responsibility here, and also to lay out our opportunity to go and work with these folks to make sure that the culvert is maintained?
That's correct. So, I mean, the infrastructure, the main infrastructures in the road, and the catch basins, the pipes and all that, that's going to be all the town. The two Caltech systems, that's going to be up to the homeowners association for the cleaning of them. If they need to be repaired, that's probably going to be Dan, if that's, I'll ask Dan that question later. The culverts, if they need to clean them out, and then yes, we would inspect them as we inspect all of them.
So, I mean, we can define the responsibility here and then be part of this permit that we grant. Now, there's another alternative here in terms of this board, and I'll leave it to my colleagues to discuss it. We could request that some specific language come back to the board at our next meeting before we approve the permit, or we can approve the permit subject to the language being submitted. I think those are our options tonight, and I would ask my colleagues to sort of weigh in on that, and how do you feel about either of those alternatives?
Jim?
Mr. Germain.
I like the latter recommendation or thought that you had, and I'll tell you why. I think they've done a commendable job thus far. I have seen Mr. American present on numerous occasions, and he's always been forthright. And I feel comfortable that if he assures us that he will work out language with us, that proviso going in will be one that is met. I don't feel that we want to hold things up, or it's my personal feeling, just to have the language rewritten if he and Melissa are willing to say, yes, we'll work out the language, so it'll be subject to that, if that's acceptable from his perspective and Melissa's perspective.
Ms. Underhill, your thoughts?
If we do approve it now with the condition, then I suppose I'm okay with that. As long as some specifications are made and some wording is added for where that responsibility lies, I think I'd be okay with it.
Okay, so in general, what I'm hearing then is the board would be willing to move forward with the permit granting subject to a mutual agreement on operations and maintenance provisions to govern culvert maintenance and mitigation. Is that, in terms of the applicant, is that an acceptable suggestion?
Yes, absolutely.
I would just like to add to it that I'd like to see that language by our next meeting. I'd like to put a table on it so we know that it doesn't just drag on. And I know this has gone for quite a while, but if we could, we have a meeting on, what, the 27th, I believe?
Yes.
So that, if we could see that by then perhaps we would, be comfortable that before anything actually happens, that we're comfortable with the language.
One other thought, Mr. Chairman, is C7, the language of C7 is a little bit different than I think the Board of Health is going to end up with, and we would like to see those be the same so we don't have different language for the same issues in the two different permits. And Melissa has.
Is that right?
The final language of C7, what I think is going to be the final language of C7.
So we're going to, if we move forward, to be subject to agreement on C7 and this other language. Is that your thought?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. Well, in general, I'm willing to take a motion that the board approves the stormwater and land disturbance permit application, subject to final agreement on the condition C7 with the Board of Health, the applicant, and the select board, and adding a condition, I guess it'd be C8, dealing with operation and maintenance of the culverts, particularly as those relate to the culverts in the street, including May Street.
I'll move exactly what you just said.
Second.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. I want to be sure that we've got the appropriate language and whatnot, so council will certainly look at it. And we'd expect to hear back from the applicant at our next meeting. With that being the case, it's been moved and seconded to approve the permit with those conditions. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries and the permit will be granted, and we will expect to hear from Mr. American and Ms. Bikos again at our next meeting. Hopefully your vacation will be over, Melissa, by then. Maybe not. Maybe you get an extra day.
I'll go on another one, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay. That moves us along to the next item on our agenda, which is some policy and some rather ministerial. We are looking to reappoint various committees to the board, town committees, to help us with our task of providing the people of Millis with the kind of service that they require and desire. I've asked that this be developed in two pieces. One is a review of the select board assignments, because we have a number of committees where the select board has either a voting member or a specific liaison member, and we try to make those assignments this time of the year. And then we have some other committee appointments. Some of them are reappointments, some of them aren't. I don't know if my colleagues have had the opportunity to think through the committee assignments that they'd be interested in. If we'd like some more time to think about it, we can always do it at the next meeting, but I'm interested in hearing whatever your thoughts are. I'll start with myself. I'm more than happy to continue work on the capital planning committee and the PBC. PBC, Permanent Building Committee, of course, turns out to be multiple projects, because we're working not only on the DPW building, but the Lansing Millis redesign and then the senior center study. So I'm happy to do that. I will continue as a Norfolk County Advisory Board designee. Turns out that's been a fairly interesting year. Usually it's a somewhat sleeper assignment. But there was a fair amount of debate this year at the county level about budgets and the role of the Registrar of Deeds and his budget. So anyway, I won't bore you anymore with that, but I did learn from those meetings that it's very difficult to have a Zoom meeting with 20 people in the room and 20 people on the phone. A lot of feedback. So, Mr. Germain, I mean, you've been assigned to these committees. I don't know if you have any interest in them. I am going to suggest that this board consider some perhaps renaming or rejiggering of the sewer and water committees, because really there's enterprise funds. And the drinking water committee itself has kind of been a little bit dormant, but more focused on water quality than maybe the broader strategy for the system. And as Mr. Germain well knows, sewer study committee is way beyond study. It is really been doing a lot of work on sort of strategic positioning of the sewer system. And I think the same kind of citizen input would be helpful in the stormwater area. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Germain or Ms. Underhill, in terms of perhaps restructuring that a little bit, or?
You mean adding stormwater to whoever is doing sewer and drinking water, or do you mean breaking it all up?
Well, no, I meant, what I was thinking is that if you're going to have a citizen committee that helps us think through issues around the enterprises.
Oh, combine it.
Something different is kind of confusing, and maybe we've reached a point in the 21st century where enterprise fund oversight by some committees beyond the board might be helpful. We as the board are responsible as the water, sewer, and I guess stormwater commissioners. We can either do it ourselves, which we do a lot of, or we can ask for some citizen input. And my feeling at this point in time is that the three enterprises we ought to have consistent nomenclature for whatever oversight we're doing with committees. And I'm not suggesting that we have one person do all three, and maybe it'd make more sense to split them up, because then you get a little bit better feel for the enterprises, how they work, what the strategy is, and work with some folks out of interest who might be willing to do that as well. I don't know. That was kind of my thought, and if we did that, maybe we would defer appointments until we've sort of thought it through a little bit.
I have one question, if I may. Is there any way that you could specify which committees the liaison would be a voting member of versus just a liaison to?
We certainly could. If we have bylaws in effect or committee charters in effect which spell it out.
Oh, okay. So we don't just have that info?
Well, some of them we do and some of them we don't.
Okay.
Mr. Germain, I believe, is a voting member of the Drinking Water Committee as well as the Sewer Study Committee. But
okay.
I haven't seen the charter in a while, and maybe we need to review that a little bit. I don't know how you feel, Pete, about that, or if that makes any sense to you, or...
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First, I like the idea of the consistency of the three enterprise funds being consistent with water, sewer, and stormwater. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's a problem in breaking them up a little, although I have to be honest, what I've been learning this year, and it's all somewhat new to me in this regard, that there's a lot of interplay between the water and the sewer. So just attending some of the meetings that I didn't realize would be quite as complicated or leaning to some rather significant concerns for our community. You really have to be a member of both to represent what we need in terms of the town. So I think it probably makes sense that the three enterprise be consolidated. They can be listed separately, but my inclination from what I've learned this year is to say one person is responsible, and we can change that around each year or whatever. But I think it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. The others are a little different, but I can tell you that sewer is going to become more active, and there are some legal issues going on, a variety of things that are taking place at this point that we have to be aware of, and that the community is ultimately going to have to be fully aware of.
I do have one other question, if I may.
Yep. Sure.
Would it be, and I bring this up because I'm willing, but would it be possible, or is it appropriate to have a liaison with the school committee?
It's possible, and let me just say, it's more than possible, in the sense that I know there are other towns where there is a more formal designation of someone who is, I don't know whether you want to call it a liaison or ambassador or something. Mm-hmm. And I'm certainly willing to consider that. I mean, I think it's a pretty good idea. What I would suggest is that we would reach out to the school committee and see if they have an interest. And of course, the complementary question is, would they have an interest in having someone from the school committee be a liaison to the select board? I mean, it's a two-way street. Maybe they'd have no interest. I don't know. But I do think that I am aware that there are other towns where there is that. I'll call it a liaison. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you in that role, you might want to be careful what you ask for. It's a full-time job.
Those meetings are long.
Yeah, well, maybe no longer than these.
Yeah.
But then you're doubling.
Why don't we do this? I mean, if you'd be willing, Aaron, to sort of flush out your idea and perhaps, float it with Carrie Roach, who's the new chair of the school committee, just have a conversation. I mean, Peter, you're okay with that? I mean, basically, it's the board delegating that idea to you to sort of see if there's a way to come up with something that would be beneficial. Because I certainly believe that anything we do over time to continue to strengthen our relationship with these two committees, boards, is well worth the time and effort. But it will be time and effort.
I absolutely concur with what you're both saying at this point. I think it's very valuable to have a liaison if we can get that established. And it's a two-way street. They would be willing to have someone participate with us. Communication, I think, is critical. And the more communication we can have, the more meeting of the minds and the fewer misunderstandings as to what our objectives and where we're moving forward.
Well, I agree with that. I think that, what we're touching upon is that there's more to it than having a budget discussion.
Right.
Which is what it basically comes up to at the end of the year. And I think we've done a reasonably good job of having good relations with the two committees, but maybe there's a little bit more depth we could go into. So why don't you touch base with her and see if you can come back with some kind of proposal that she thinks makes sense and that we could agree on. And I'd certainly think that would be a good idea.
Now, for the rest of these, were all the blank ones, were these all the ones that Loring was doing?
The
Yes.
prior chair, yes.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that the people who are doing these now should remain, but I think that makes some sense, because sometimes the more than 1 year of work is what's needed to make it happen. Now, something that you're not interested in, that's fine. We can try and talk it through, but...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask quickly again, going back to the enterprise fund. So are you saying, was the decision that you kind of want to look into combining all three into one committee? Is that what you're kind of, or no?
I think we're thinking about it.
So.
It may work, but if we go with enterprise committee,
Right.
Another way to do it is to say there's the water enterprise committee. There's the sewer enterprise committee.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. As far as appointing everybody, you may want to do more research before,
and
like you said.
Point, and I think Pete's point was that it may make sense for a single member of this board to serve on each of the three committees,
Right.
but then have those committees with populated perhaps with some other people. Is that, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Pete, but I think that's where you were
That's
headed.
a very precise interpretation of where I was at.
So that's something we should probably wait until next time, do more research, I'm guessing.
Okay. We'll come up with a more concrete
Yeah,
proposal there.
okay.
And I'm certainly willing to put off some of these others as well. I know it's typically done by now, but if we're going to restructure things, we've got to do it in a forward-looking manner.
Right.
I want to ask a question about Master Planning Implementation Committee.
Mm.
I don't think there's a point to that any longer.
There's no master plan?
Uh,
Yeah.
That was always something, sorry, Mr. Chair, that was something that I don't think we've done since Charlie left, quite honestly. I think it kind of dissolved.
That's why I bring it up.
Right.
Okay.
So you're
And
right.
the point is, the master plan was developed, I think, 10, 15 years ago, maybe more.
More.
You had a group of people who were responsible for trying to implement it. Well, that's way past, it may well be that the right thing to do is to review the master plan, which is
The
certainly,
Master Plan Review Committee, that's just about what I was going to say. Probably
Yeah,
in a year or two,
absolutely.
you probably want to start that.
looking forward, not trying to worry about implementing what is now old news.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that the Master Plan Implementation Committee is one that we should probably have a sunset on, and then, as Mr. Kaczynski indicated, perhaps focus instead on master plan development. Emergency planning is important to have a liaison, and
Yes.
also the CPC. Those roles are important because they're obviously emergency planning is important, and it's a multi-departmental committee. At CPC, I think there's a statutory requirement that we have a member
Yes.
on there.
That's a voting, I believe.
Yes, and a voting member. So, and the IS&C committee, Pete, I moved two committees that are sort of dealing with communications and technology, and one of them is a little more technical, the other one isn't. That would be the website communications committee. Does it make any sense to sort of
Combine
pull
them.
that together somehow, or are they different? I mean, they are different, but
They're
Am I
different.
missing a page? I don't see the website one.
Well, it's not on
There is
website's
no
not a
liaison, it was
liaison.
just members.
Oh.
the liaisons that we have here.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think it should be, and I think it should all be pulled under the IS and communications, at least from our perspective,
right.
because it does tend to fall in that way. I also had a comment, if I may, on the Energy Committee. I know in the past, and I see who's on it, but we're getting more and more dependent on IT. And to be honest with you, most organizations will include an IT director or someone in the emergency planning
Yep.
contingency area. I think we ought to think about doing that for our town also. There are too many things that happen that require understanding of the IT infrastructure, particularly in an emergency. We have to use it, we have to gain access, we have to stabilize it, or we may have to disperse. And if that happens, we need to know how we deal with everything at that point.
Well, that's a really good, a good segue, I guess, into a little bit of conversation about that, because emergency planning, includes the fire chief, school transportation facilities, town administrator, the nurse, Board of Health, DPW, police, so, yeah, and it begs there
Yeah.
for IT.
We've never had it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we might want to think about adding that. My thought here is that I'd rather have this little bit of conversation tonight about what we want to do with committees and maybe collapse some and then come back the next meeting. I know it's a month late, and firm up who's going to do what and what committees we want to consolidate and what we'd like to, not. I mean, I don't have a problem tonight if it makes sense from an organizational perspective, particularly so we keep doing business, to approve something like, the Board of Assessors representative, and the finance director, and the fence viewer, and
Oh,
the public weighers, and the register of voters, and those kinds of committees.
Mr. Chair, I was going to say, if I suggested, would it be something that if you guys, the three of you, want to take a look, set out these committees with some of your thoughts, you could send them and vet them through me?
Yeah.
And I could then put together a list for the next meeting of the ones that you're looking to possibly combine and you can make decisions on? Does that
Okay,
helpful?
we could do that. I don't want to, if we have any risk of not reappointing the finance director, for example.
No, not for the report. I mean for the ones that you were kind of, the ones that you're looking at here that I have up there, where you're saying some of these should be, yeah.
Why don't we, may I make a
Whatever you
suggestion?
think.
We go just through this list, it's 4 pages,
Yeah.
more or less, quickly to say, yeah, certain ones, there's no reason we can't say, yeah, reappoint them. And
Okay.
then we'll know what we've reappointed and we can deal with the rest in the next week.
All right, I'm willing to do that. So we'll also, as we go through it, I'll ask the other board members to consider the conversation we had about the prior exhibit, to firm up what you think you'd like to do in terms of assignments, and then we can come back and make those formal liaison assignments.
Okay.
At the next meeting.
And
Okay.
then particularly important to hear some feedback from Aaron about what the appetite from the school committee is as to more
Yeah.
formal relationship. Because I think that'd be a big assignment in terms of time, and important as well.
okay.
All right, so let's shift gear and go to the 4 sheets here. And I'll sort of go through it as you... so the Agriculture Commission, I think, does work. And it's been reasonably active. And I know that, for example, Linda, and I'll never get her name right, has been happy to
Chirizio.
participate where Tangerini's used to. So I'm willing to make a motion that we reappoint Diane Hubbard, Robert Cantareggi, and Linda C. as members of the Agricultural Commission.
Maurizio or something like
Second.
that. Second, yeah.
So moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to.
Yes.
Lord, it's getting late.
The Board of Assessors, Mr. Cantareggi, I move that we reappoint him as a member of the Board of Assessors.
3 years.
3-year
Second.
appointment.
Do
Did-
we not also appoint Terry to the Board of Assessors?
No,
term.
that's a town administrator appointment. That's not a you appointment.
Okay.
Sorry.
So moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Cable Advisory Committee, I recommend that we go back to the drawing boards on this one.
Yep.
We have, frankly, we completed the work on the 2 new contracts with the providers, and we may want to rethink this committee.
Okay.
They've done great work, but I think it's time to take another look, and maybe we do a little outreach to see what makes sense going forward. And the folks involved have done a great job, but I think it's time to take another look at this, is to determine how we want this to proceed. And we were told by outside counsel that some towns, after completing contract negotiations and whatnot, eliminates this committee. But I don't know whether we want to do that yet, but I don't think we should reappoint them at this point.
Okay.
Capital planning, I would make a motion that we reappoint, and we're not deciding who the chair is, but
Right. I'm sorry. Those were just notes for me that I should have taken off.
John Barry, Peter Berube, John Corcoran, Kerry Roach, Mike Kaczynski.
Second.
I'm sorry, Mike Kaczynski is the ex officio, which means he doesn't vote, but he goes
And he's only for 1 year. The rest are for 2.
for 2 years, right? And we'll come back to the board appointment next time, because that's the other member of this, and we need 2 more people out there. But anyway, it was moved and seconded. Poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Cemetery Committee, This has been a very active and very committed committee over time.
Yes.
And frankly, the cemetery is tribute to their work. So I would make a motion that the board reappoint for a one-year term Marcia Collins, John Doyle, Jim McKay, Jeff Mushnick, and Charles Vecchi as the cemetery committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Now, the CPC, do we appoint the FinCom liaison?
Yes,
Or do that?
you do.
We do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Assuming this is so, I would make a motion that we appoint Sean Power as the CPC FinCom liaison for a 3-year term.
Yes.
Second.
Moved in second. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Conservation Commission. I guess we've been informed that these two members are interested in reappointment. And so I would make a motion that we appoint Christine Gavin and Ram Charan Khalsa to 3-year terms on the Conservation Commission.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Council on Aging, I'm going to recuse myself from one of them. But I would make a motion that the board appoint for 3-year Council on Aging term William Brown and Lisette Walter.
I'll make a motion that we reappoint Christine McCaffrey.
Second.
So the first motion is for Mr. Brown and Ms. Walter. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And for the other appointment of Christine McCaffrey, I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, I abstain. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Okay, those are carried. Now, Cultural Council, reappointment of Laura Doherty and
Oh,
Patrick
sorry,
Neville.
excuse me, Mr. Chair. Not
Yes, go ahead.
Patrick Neville, just Laura Doherty.
Oh.
So
Okay,
straight
we just-
Patrick.
Patrick Neville, right?
Just Laura this time.
Okay, anyway. So I make a motion that we have a 3-year appointment on the Cultural Council of Laura Doherty.
Correct.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Okay, drinking water, we're going to defer on. Do we come back to discuss how we want to structure it? Economic Development Committee, 1-year terms. I make a motion that the board reappoint Amanda Borgman, Nate Maltinsky, Nicole Riley, James Sabatis, Mark Spangenberg, and Beth Murphy as the Economic Development Committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Energy Committee. These are 1-year terms. Reappointment of Timothy Farrar, Chris Jackson, Tom O'Connell, Kathleen Streck, John Barry, Craig Gibbons, and Mike Gazinski ex officio.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
State Ethics Committee Liaison, Karen Bure. I make a motion that the board approve the appointment of Karen Bure as the State Ethics Committee Liaison.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
And Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
So she'll be calling on you for your ethics compliance, right? Not you, but all of us.
I did it.
So then I make a motion for a 1-year term as fence viewers for Michael Giapietro and Michael Gazinski.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
What is a fence viewer?
They go look.
We look at fences and confirm they're there or not there, or if it is a fence or not a fence, and if it's on the property line or not on the property line. It's exciting stuff.
And just so you know, you have to have
There
two.
are real things that happen when neighbors don't agree on whose land the property, the fence is on.
Oftentimes is a neighbor dispute, yes.
Yes.
I was just wondering if we sit on the fence and
Right, would you like that job, Pete?
I'm willing to step aside if any member of the board would like to step forward
Yes.
for it.
I wouldn't take that away from you for anything.
And you have to have two. You can't just have one, which is how Mr. Kaczynski got roped into that.
All right, so I've got the motion for Mr. Gianpietro and Mr. Kaczynski. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Keep you awake. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Okay, I make a motion that the board reappoint Carol Johnson as the finance director.
There you go.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
With respect to the Historical Commission, 3-year terms, reappointment of Joanne Gannon, Cheryl Proofer, Margaret Wilkes, and Nathan Maltinsky.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, but for the board to make these 3-year appointments to the Historical Commission, I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
That's carried. We're going to defer on IS and C, and local emergency planning committee. Okay, I'll make the motion, but before I do that, would it make sense to include then an appointment of the IT director as a member? Is that the consensus the board would like to see?
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Although we don't have an IT director, do we?
Well, we don't have a paid one.
Well,
Everyone's looking at you, Pete.
Just throwing that out there. I don't know.
well, I think, Mr. Germain's comment is very apropos, and
Yes.
the IT director will further notice. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to make the following appointments then to the Emergency Planning Committee. And of course, this does raise the possibility that we have filled 2 shoes here with one person. The first one would be the Select Board liaison,
Yes.
and the second one would be the IT director.
Who would it be?
Look at that.
The motion will be made as follows. I make a motion that we appoint the Fire Chief, Richard Barrett, Sandra Labarge, John Engler, Mike Kaczynski, Emily
Delalio.
It's getting late. Delalio, Paul Jacobson, Kathleen Lannon, James McKay, John McVeigh, Christopher Sapphire, and Peter Germain as IT Director and Board Liaison to the Local Emergency Planning Committee for 1-year term. Moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
I'll abstain. I think I have to do that.
Well, you can, okay, all right, you can abstain. And, Bill?
Yes.
Carried unanimously. Master Planning Committee, we probably will not reappoint. MBTA Advisory Board designee, Mr. Robert Weiss. Make a motion that we appoint him as our MBTA Advisory Board delegate.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Oh, no, I can't do that. Jeez. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
I'm sorry to put us through this torture, but I started down this trail, and we're going to keep up. Although I might do this. Okay, here, I'm going to try this one on you. I make a motion that the board approve the appointment of Michael Kaczynski to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council representative, Nicole Riley as a Metropolitan Area Planning Council representative, Craig Schultz as a 3-year term on the Permanent Building Committee, Patrick Sheehan in a 3-year term on the Permanent Building Committee, and Joshua Guerrero as the Planning Board Associate.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for these appointments to the Advisory Board designee, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, Permanent Building Committee, and Planning Board Associate Member. All those I'm sorry. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Okay. Bear with me on this one. These are all one-year appointments. I move that the board appoint the following individuals as public weighers: Kenneth Bianco, Michael Collins, Donald Galeni, Paul LaPierre, Jason Larviere. Is that the right spelling?
I will have
Yes,
to look at it. I think so, yes. Sure.
Larviere, I'm sorry. Arthur
Larviere.
Murphy, Michael Pugnasis, Scott Rory, Francis Rossi, John Tresca, Robert Tresca, Stephen Tresca, and the following individuals as members of the Recreation Committee for one-year terms: Michael Banks, Stephen Cassidy, Timothy Davis, Kristen Fogarty, Aaron LeBlanc, Sharon Locke, Pamela Mustard, and Susan Vera.
Did you get Arthur Murphy?
I
Public
did.
weigher? Okay. Assuming you did.
Yes.
Yeah, we did. We got Arthur Murphy. So I'll poll the board for those nominations. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to make the following nomination. Mr. Rob Weiss as the Regional Transportation Advisory Council representative. Karen Beret as the Register of Voters for the Democrats. Mark Conroy. Does I have to tell the party here?
No, that's just, no.
Okay. Mark Conroy, Lisa Jane Harden, and Robert Yeager. And the Right to Know Coordinator, John McVeigh.
Second.
Yes.
Moved and seconded for the appointments to the Regional Transportation Advisory Council, the Registrar of the Voters, and the Right to Know Coordinator. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Okay. Can somebody tell me what the point of this one is?
Safety.
I can. The safety committee is actually something that we get, how do we say this? We get money back for insurance. We get credits for our insurance.
From our insurance company for having a safety committee, and they have to meet, I think it's quarterly, I believe. And we get a discount. We get a discount on our insurance because they meet and discuss safety issues. Usually someone from our insurance company comes to the meetings, discusses safety issues.
It helps us get grants.
It's like 1 hour meeting once every 3 months.
But we need to do it to comply with our insurance requirements.
Yes, and we get and there's grant opportunities, so it is quite worthy.
Or credits from our insurance company for doing it.
Yes.
Let me make it clear. I wasn't questioning that there's value.
Just wondering what it was.
Why the select board is appointing department heads to a committee? Why isn't the town administrator doing it?
I don't know why that's.
It could be switched, I suppose. Generally,
it could be wrong on the sheet,
maybe appointments have been the board, but.
All right. Well, I'm willing to go forward on this, I guess. But it seems to me that this is the kind of committee that's really an internal management committee.
You would think.
We have to have it. It's a good idea, but why does the board have to approve?
I don't know. Good question.
Well, let's go ahead and appoint them and
I will
think
look into
about
that.
next year having the town administrator do it. So I would move that the following individuals be appointed members of the Safety Committee: Richard Barrett, Karen Beret, John Engler, James McKay, Paul Sims, John McVeigh, Christopher Sapphire, Kimberly Tolson, Sandra Labarge, and Pete Germain. Oh, wait a minute. No, not Pete.
Pete.
Second.
I'm going to deal with him later.
He gets punchy after 10.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
and we're deferring conversation on sewer study. I'll move the following appointments for one-year term: Southwest Area Planning Council Robert Weiss, Southwest Area Planning Council Nicole Riley, Surveyor of Wood and Lumber Mike Petro, Town Council Mead, Tallerman, and Costa, Town Council Labor KP Law David Jenkins. Mead, Tallerman, and Costa Jay Tallerman. Jay Tallerman of Mead, Tallerman, and Costa. David Jenkins of KP Law for Labor Council. Robert Cantareggi as Tree Warden. Richard Vettor as the Deputy Tree Warden. Period.
Second.
And you're deferring the website, right?
To deal with Southwest area, the SWAP representatives, the survey of wooden lumber, town council and town labor council, and tree warden. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Jermaine,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
And we're deferring on the next one for a conversation at the next meeting. So we will not be reappointing that committee at this time. And then we have town administrator appointments, which I don't have to worry about, right? Are you going to
You
make
do
that
not.
subject
I just included those.
approval, or Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, request the board ratify the following appointments. Brenda Hamlin as animal inspector, Terry Gonzalez as assistant assessor, Michael Gianpietro as building commissioner, Gary Pelletier, deputy building inspector, Jim McKay, DPW director, Patricia Kao, council on aging director, and Robert Weiss, economic development director for 1 year terms.
Okay, I make a motion that the board approve the town administrator's appointments of Brenda Hamlin as animal inspector, Terry Gonzalez as assistant assessor, Mike Gianpietro as building commissioner, Gary Pelletier as deputy building commissioner, James McKay as DPW director, Patricia Kao as council on aging director, and Robert Weiss as the economic development director.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Jermaine,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Thank you all. Happy to entertain.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board adjourn the meeting. Poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Jermaine,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Thank you all for your diligence and hard work, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good night.